Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog, and today we are reading Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, starting with part 5, chapter 21. But first, so the plan today is to finish. I know I very heartily, with all of my might, proclaimed last week that we were going to finish part 5, but it's going to happen today. Today. Okay, so that being said, let's do reading updates. Okay, reading updates. I finished What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. It is an inspired story, or it's a story inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. It's very, very short. It's under 200 pages, and yeah, it has a nice twist to it. So it has like the underings, the like foundation of Poe's work, and then Kingfisher does a really good job of like making it their own, and I think that that's really good. I enjoyed it. You could read it in one sitting because it's under 200 pages. I think I read it in 2 days. And then what else? I talked about having The Watchers by Dean Koontz. I'm going to be starting that very soon. I am reading We Were Villains, which is right here, and I'm a little scared since the lights are there. Okay, we're fine. If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. It is a dark academia book, and it starts out with our main character, Oliver, being released. Oh no, I have made a mess. Being released from prison after being there for 10 years. And the person who meets them there is the detective who put him away, and he wants to know what actually happened 10 years ago. So then we're flashing back, and it is like what happened while he was in school. So I think that that's pretty. I'm enjoying it. I can't say too much because spoilers, all of those things, but I am enjoying it. We'll see how it goes. It is our birdie read, buddy read for Patreon. So we are having asynchronous discussions on Discord. I think that's it. So that brings us to Anna Karenina. What happened last time? Okay, well, we spent a lot of time with Kitty and Levin because drama happened. Well, okay, so they're married now, and they are off into the country living their own life, and they are both realizing that their expectations and their hopes and their dreams and their wants of what a marriage is not really reality. So they're getting into fights. They are realizing like all of these things that they probably should have realized or talked about before they got married, and they didn't because that's just not how things worked in the past. You don't get to know people first. That's no. And while they are there, they each get a letter. Kitty gets a letter back from home, and Levin gets a letter from his brother's partner, and she is writing to say that Levin's brother is not doing well at all. Like, he is on death's door, which we knew before the last time we saw him because he visited and he did not look great. So Levin decides to go. Kitty is like, I'm going with you. Levin is like, don't you dare. Kitty is like, I dare. And so they decide that Kitty is going to go. And so they both travel off to visit Levin's brother, and they get there, and the place that he is staying is not great. It's not comfortable. It's not clean. Like, it's just not what you would want or anyone would want. And so Kitty just immediately sets to work. She sees all of the problems. She like mentally puts them on a checklist, and she just goes through and fixes all of them, which is great. And so she is making the place as comfortable as she possibly can. She's talking with Levin's brother and, talking about the wedding and talking about like her and like catching him up on everything. And it is so great. And Levin is just kind of the opposite in that he doesn't really know what to do. And because he doesn't know what to do, he's kind of frozen and doesn't proceed. So it is a very good thing that Kitty was there. And there were a couple times when we thought that Levin's brother died, and then he just didn't, and then we thought that he did, and then he didn't, and that happened a couple times. But we ended with all of us finding out, and I think also Kitty at the same time, that Kitty is with child. And that's kind of where we leave it, because chapter 21, which is where we're starting with part 5, chapter 21, goes back to Alexei Alexandrovich. So now we're going back to them, to all of that drama business. So let's have a sip. Let's get cozy. And let's do it. Oh gosh, I touched buttons. Okay. Chapter 21. From the moment when Alexei Alexandrovich understood from his interviews with Betsy and with Stepan Arkadyevich that all that was expected of him was to leave his wife in peace, without burdening her with his presence, and that his wife herself desired this, he felt so distraught that he could come to no decision of himself. He did not know himself what he wanted now, and putting himself in the hands of those who were so pleased to interest themselves in his affair, he met everything with unqualified assent. It was only when Anna had left his house, and the English governess sent to ask him whether she should dine with him or separately, that for the first time he clearly comprehended his position, and was appalled by it. Most difficult of all in this position was the fact that he could not in any way connect and reconcile his past with what was now. It was not the past when he had lived happily with his wife that troubled him. The transition from that past to a knowledge of his wife's unfaithfulness he had lived through miserably already. That state was painful, but he could understand it. If his wife had then, on declaring to him her unfaithfulness, left him, he would have been wounded, unhappy, but he would not have been in the hopeless position, incomprehensible to himself, in which he felt himself now. He could not now reconcile his immediate past, his tenderness, his love for his sick wife, and for the other man's child, with what was now the case. That is, with the fact that, as it were, in return for all this, he now found himself alone, put to shame, a laughingstock, needed by no one and despised by everyone. For the first 2 days after his wife's departure, Alexei Alexandrovich received applicants for assistance, and his chief secretary drove to the committee and went down to dinner in the dining room, as usual. Without giving himself a reason for what he was doing, he strained every nerve of his being for those 2 days, simply to preserve an appearance of composure and even of indifference. Answering inquiries about the disposition of Anna Arkadyevna's rooms and belongings, he had exercised immense self-control to appear like a man in whose eyes what had occurred was not unforeseen, nor out of the ordinary course of events. And he attained his aim. No one could have detected in him signs of despair. But on the second day after his departure, when Corney gave him a bill from a fashionable draper's shop, which Anna had forgotten to pay, and announced that the clerk from the shop was waiting, Alexei Alexandrovich told him to show the clerk up. "Excuse me, Your Excellency, for venturing to trouble you, but if you direct us to apply to Your Excellency, would you graciously oblige us with her address?" Alexei Alexandrovich pondered, as it seemed to the clerk, and all at once, turning round, he sat down at the table. Letting his head sink into his hands, he sat for a long while in that position, several times attempted to speak, and stopped short. Corny, perceiving his master's emotion, asked the clerk to call another time. Left alone, Alexei Alexandrovich recognized that he had not the strength to keep up the line of firmness and composure any longer. He gave orders for the carriage that was awaiting him to be taken back, and for no one to be admitted, and he did not go down to dinner. He felt that he could not endure the weight of universal contempt and exasperation, which he had distinctly seen in the face of the clerk and of Corny, and of everyone, without exception, whom he had met during those 2 days. He felt that he could not turn aside from himself the hatred of men, because that hatred did not come from his being bad. In that case, he could have tried to be better, but from his being shamefully and repulsively unhappy. He knew that for the very fact that his heart was torn with grief, they would be merciless to him. He felt that men would crush him as dogs strangle a torn dog, yelping with pain. He knew that his sole means of security against people was to hide his wounds from them, and instinctively he tried to do this for 2 days. But now he felt incapable of keeping up with the unequal struggle. His despair was even intensified by the consciousness that he was utterly alone in his sorrow. In all Petersburg, there was not a human being to whom he could express what he was feeling, who would feel for him, not as a high official, not as a member of society, but simply as a suffering man. Indeed, he had not such a one in the whole world. Alexei Alexandrovich grew up an orphan. There were 2 brothers. They did not remember their father, and their mother died when Alexei Alexandrovich was 10 years old. The property was a small one. Their uncle, Karenin, a government official of high standing, at one time a favorite of the late Tsar, had brought them up. On completing his high school and university courses with medals, Alexei Alexandrovich had, with his uncle's aid, immediately started in a prominent position in the service, and from that time forward, he had devoted himself exclusively to political ambition. In the high school and the university, and afterwards in the service, Alexei Alexandrovich had never formed a close friendship with anyone. His brother had been the person nearest to his heart, but he had a post in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and was always abroad, where he had died shortly after Alexei Alexandrovich's marriage. While he was governor of a province, Anna's aunt, a wealthy provincial lady, had thrown him, middle-aged as he was, though young for a governor, with her niece, and had succeeded in putting him in such a position that he had either to declare himself or to leave the town. Alexei Alexandrovich was not long in hesitation. There were, at the time, as many reasons for the step as against it, and there was no overbalancing consideration to outweigh his invariable rule of abstaining when in doubt. But Anna's aunt had, through a common acquaintance, insinuated that he had already compromised the girl, and that he was in honor bound to make her an offer. He made the offer, and concentrated on his betrothed and his wife all the feeling of which he was capable. The attachment he felt to Anna precluded in his heart every need of intimate relations with others, and now among all his acquaintances he had not one friend. He had plenty of so-called connections, but no friendships. Alexei Alexandrovich had plenty of people whom he could invite to dinner, to whose sympathy he could appeal in any public affair he was concerned about, whose interest he could reckon upon for anyone he wished to help, with whom he could candidly discuss other people's business and affairs of state. But his relations with these people were confined to one clearly defined channel, and had a certain routine from which it was impossible to depart. There was one man, a comrade of his at the university, with whom he had made friends later, and with whom he could have spoken of a personal sorrow. But his friend had a post in the Department of Education in a remote part of Russia. Of the people in Petersburg, the most intimate and most possible were his chief secretary and his doctor. Mikhail Vasilyevich Sludin, the chief secretary, was a straightforward, intelligent, good-hearted, and conscientious man, and Alexei Alexandrovich was aware of his personal goodwill. But their 5 years of official work together seemed to have put a barrier between them that cut off warmer relations. After signing the papers brought him, Alexei Alexandrovich had sat for a long while in silence, glancing at Mikhail Vasilyevich, and several times he attempted to speak, but could not. He had already prepared the phrase, "Have you heard of my trouble?" But he ended by saying, as usual, "So you'll get this ready for me," and with that dismissed him. The other person was the doctor, who had also a kindly feeling for him, but there had long existed a taciturn understanding between them that both were weighed down by work and always in a hurry. Of his women friends, foremost amongst them Countess Lydia Ivanovna, Alexei Alexandrovich never thought. All women, simply as women, were terrible and distasteful to him. End of chapter 21. Okay, chapter 21, we are back with Alexei Alexandrovich. And this is a time when, I think they said a time, I don't remember, but his wife, Anna Karenina, and Vronsky have left. They have gone to travel abroad, and now he's just left to figure out, like, what to do. And people are kind of, like, asking him, and he's avoiding as much as possible to say what has happened. And we also get a little bit of background of the circumstances in which Alexei and Anna got married. And it wasn't, like, because they knew each other or because they spent time with each other or anything like that. So I think that is also telling and interesting. Chapter 22. Alexei Alexandrovich had forgotten the Countess Lydia Ivanovna, but she had not forgotten him. At the bitterest moment of his lonely despair, she came to him, and without waiting to be announced, walked straight into his study. She found him as he was sitting with his head in both hands. "J'ai forcé la consigne," she said, walking in with rapid steps and breathing hard with excitement and rapid exercise. "I have heard it all, Alexei Alexandrovich, dear friend," she went on, warmly squeezing his hand in both of hers and gazing with her fine, pensive eyes into his. Alexei Alexandrovich, frowning, got up and, disengaging his hand, moved her a chair. "Won't you sit down, Countess? I'm seeing no one because I'm unwell, Countess," he said, and his lips twitched. "Dear friend," repeated Countess Lydia Ivanovna, never taking her eyes off of his, and suddenly her eyebrows rose at the inner corners, describing a triangle on her forehead. Her ugly face became still uglier. But Alexei Alexandrovitch felt that she was sorry for him and was preparing to cry. And he, too, was softened. He snatched her plump hand and proceeded to kiss it. "Dear friend," she said, in a voice breaking with emotion, "you ought not to give way to grief. Your sorrow is a great one, but you ought to find consolation." "I am crushed. I am annihilated. I am no longer a man," said Alexei Alexandrovitch, letting go her hand, but still gazing into her brimming eyes. "My position is so awful because I can find nowhere. I cannot find within me strength to support me." "You will find support. Seek it. Not in me, though. I beseech you to believe in my friendship," she said with a sigh. "Our support is love. That love he has vouchsafed us. His burden is light," she said, with a look of ecstasy Alexei Alexandrovitch knew so well. "He will be your support and your succor." Although there was in these words a flavor of that sentimental emotion at her own lofty feelings, and that new mystical fervor which had lately gained ground in Petersburg, and which seemed to Alexei Alexandrovitch disproportionate, still, it was pleasant to him to hear this now. "I am weak. I am crushed. I foresaw nothing, and now I understand nothing." "Dear friend," repeated Lydia Ivanovna. "It's not the loss of what I have not now. It's not that," pursued Alexei Alexandrovitch. "I do not grieve for that, but I cannot help feeling humiliated before other people for the position I am placed in. It is wrong, but I can't help it. I can't help it." "Not you, it was performed that noble act of forgiveness, at which I was moved to ecstasy, and everyone else too, but he, working within your heart," said Countess Lydia Ivanovna, raising her eyes rapturously, "and so you cannot be ashamed of your act." Alexei Alexandrovitch knitted his brows, and crooking his hands, he cracked his fingers. "One must know all the facts," he said, in his thin voice. "A man's strength has its limits, Countess, and I have reached my limits. The whole day I have had to be making arrangements about household matters arising," he emphasized the word, arising, "from my new solitary position. The servants, the governess, the accounts, these pinpricks have stabbed me to the heart, and I have not the strength to bear it. At dinner, yesterday, I was almost getting up from the dinner table. I could not bear the way my son looked at me. He did not ask me the meaning of it at all, but he wanted to ask, and I could not bear the look in his eyes. He was afraid to look at me. But that is not all." Alexei Alexandrovitch would have referred to the bill that had been brought him, but his voice shook, and he stopped. That bill on blue paper for a hat and ribbons he could not recall without a rush of self-pity. "Oh, I understand, dear friend," said Lydia Ivanovna. "I understand it all. Succor and comfort you will find not in me, though I have come only to aid you if I can. If I could take from off you all these petty, humiliating cares. I understand that a woman's word, a woman's superintendence is needed. You will entrust it to me?" Silently and gratefully, Alexei Alexandrovitch pressed her hand. "Together, we will take care of Siroisa. Practical affairs are not my strong point, but I will set to work. I will be your housekeeper. Don't thank me. I do it not from myself. I cannot help thanking you. Oh, but dear friend, do not give way to the feeling of which you spoke, being ashamed of what is the Christian highest glory. He who humbles himself shall be exalted. And you cannot thank me. You must thank him and pray to him for succor. In him alone we find peace, consolation, salvation, and love, she said, and turning her eyes heavenwards, she began praying as Alexei Alexandrovich gathered from her silence. Alexei Alexandrovich listened to her now, and those expressions which had seemed to him, if not distasteful, at least exaggerated, now seemed to him natural and consolatory. Alexei Alexandrovich had disliked this new enthusiastic fervor. He was a believer who was interested in religion primarily in its political aspect, and the new doctrine which ventured upon several new interpretations just because it paved the way to discussion and analysis, as was in principle disagreeable to him. He had hitherto taken up a cold and even antagonistic attitude to this new doctrine, and with Countess Lydia Ivanovna, who had been carried away by it, he had never argued, but by silence and had assiduously parried her attempts to provoke him into argument. Now, for the first time, he heard her words with pleasure, and did not inwardly oppose them. I am very, very grateful to you, both for your deeds and for your words, he said, when she had finished praying. Countess Lydia Ivanovna once more pressed both her friend's hands. Now, I will enter upon my duties, she said with a smile after a pause, as she wiped away the traces of tears. I am going to see Rosa. Only in the last extremity shall I apply to you. And she got up and went away. Countess Lydia Ivanovna went into Siroiza's part of the house, and dropping tears on the scared child's cheeks, she told him that his father was a saint, and his mother was dead. Countess Lydia Ivanovna kept her promise. She did actually take upon herself the care of the organization and management of Alexei Alexandrovich's household. But she had not overstated the case when saying that practical affairs were not her strong point. All her arrangements had to be modified because they could not be carried out, and they were modified by Korny, Alexei Alexandrovich's valet, who, though no one was aware of the fact, now managed Karenin's household, and quietly and discreetly reported to his master while he was dressing all it was necessary for him to know. But Lydia Ivanovna's help was none the less real. She gave Alexei Alexandrovich moral support in the consciousness of her love and respect for him, and still more, as it was soothing to her to believe, in that she almost turned him to Christianity. That is, from an indifferent and apathetic believer, she turned him into an ardent and steadfast adherent of the new interpretation of Christian doctrine, which had been gaining ground of late in Petersburg. It was easy for Alexei Alexandrovich to believe in this teaching. Alexei Alexandrovich, like Lydia Ivanovna indeed, and others who shared their views, was completely devoid of vividness of imagination, that spiritual faculty in virtue of which the conceptions evoked by the imagination became so vivid that they must needs be in harmony with other conceptions and with actual fact. He saw nothing impossible and inconceivable in the idea that death, though existing for non-believers, did not exist for him, and that, as he was possessed of the most perfect faith, of the measure of which he was himself the judge, therefore there was no sin in his soul, and he was experiencing complete salvation here, on earth. It is true that the erroneousness and shallowness of this conception of his faith was dimly perceptible to Alexei Alexandrovich, and he knew that when, without the slightest idea that his forgiveness was the action of a higher power, he had surrendered directly to the feeling of forgiveness, he had felt more happiness than now when he was thinking every instant that Christ was in his heart, and that in signing official papers he was doing his will. But for Alexei Alexandrovich it was a necessity to think in that way. It was such a necessity for him in his humiliation to have some elevated standpoint, however imaginary, from which, looked down upon by all, he could look down on others, that he clung as to his one salvation, to his delusion of salvation. End of chapter 22. Okay, chapter 22, we are sticking with Alexei Alexandrovich, and we get a little visit from Lydia Ivanovna, and she comes there and she is just like, oh, Alexei, I have heard everything. I'm so terribly sorry. No need to thank me. I will take care of all of your affairs, but know that I'm not going to be very good at it, but I will help you with Siroiza, and I will help you with everything. I will help you manage the house, all of these things, blah, blah, blah. No need to thank me. I am merely doing his will. And so she is, there was a mention that Alexei, like, knew of religion, but only in, like, the political sense, not necessarily in this, like, newfangled way that people were going into Christianity, which Lydia Ivanovna is demonstrating here. But the longer that Lydia is staying, the more that Alexei is being transformed into her way of thinking and her way of believing. And the way that he is seeing it is that he is hiding from his humiliation, and just is getting comfort from it, knowing that there is somebody, whether imaginary or not, looking down on everybody, and that there is, like, a plan, and that when he's signing papers, he's doing it through his will and all of these other things. Okay. Chapter 23. The Countess Lydia Ivanovna had, as a very young and sentimental girl, been married to a wealthy man of high rank, an extremely good-natured, jovial, and extremely dissipated rake. 2 months after marriage, her husband abandoned her, and her impassioned protestations of affection he met with a sarcasm and even hostility that people, knowing the Count's good heart and seeing no defects in the sentimental Lydia, were at a loss to explain. Though they were divorced and lived apart, yet whenever the husband met the wife, he invariably behaved to her with the same malignant irony, the cause of which was incomprehensible. Countess Lydia Ivanovna had long given up being in love with her husband, but from that time she had never given up being in love with someone. She was in love with several people at once, both men and women. She had been in love with almost everyone who had been particularly distinguished in any way. She was in love with all the new princes and princesses who married into the imperial family. She had been in love with a high dignitary of the church, a vicar, and a parish priest. She had been in love with a journalist, 3 Slavophiles with Komisarov, and a minister, a doctor, an English missionary, and Karenin. All these passions, constantly waning or growing more ardent, did not prevent her from keeping up the most extended and complicated relations with the court and fashionable society. But from the time that after Karenin's trouble she took him under her special protection, from the time that she set to work in Karenin's household looking after his welfare, she felt that all her other attachments were not the real thing, and that she was now genuinely in love, and with no one but Karenin. The feeling she now experienced for him seemed to her stronger than any of her former feelings. Analyzing her feeling and comparing it with former passions, she distinctly perceived that she would not have been in love with Komisarov if he had not saved the life of the Tsar, that she would not have been in love with Ristich Kudchitsky if there had been no Slavonic question, but that she loved Karenin for himself, for his lofty, uncomprehended soul, for the sweet, to her, high notes of his voice, for his drawling intonation, his weary eyes, his character, and his soft white hands with their swollen veins. She was not simply overjoyed at meeting him, but she sought in his face signs of the impression she was making on him. She tried to please him not by her words only, but in her whole person. For his sake it was that she now lavished more care on her dress than before. She caught herself in reveries on what might have been if she had not been married and she had been free. She blushed with emotion when she came into the room. She could not repress a smile of rapture when she said anything amiable to her. For several days now, Countess Lydia Ivanovna had been in a state of intense excitement. She had learned that Anna and Vronsky were in Petersburg. Alexei Alexandrovich must be saved from seeing her. He must be saved from the torturing knowledge that that awful woman was in the same town with him, and that he might meet her any minute. Lydia Ivanovna made inquiries through her friends as to what those infamous people, as she called Anna and Vronsky, intended doing, and she endeavored so to guide every movement of her friend during those days that he could not come across them. The young adjutant, in acquaintance of Vronsky, through whom she obtained her information, and who hoped through Countess Lydia Ivanovna to obtain a concession, told her that they had finished their business and were going away next day. Lydia Ivanovna had already begun to calm down, when the next morning a note was brought her, the handwriting of which she recognized with horror. It was the handwriting of Anna Karenina. The envelope was of paper as thick as bark. On the oblong yellow paper there was a huge monogram, and the letter smelt of agreeable scent. Who brought it? A commissionaire from the hotel. It was some time before Countess Lydia Ivanovna could sit down to read the letter. Her excitement brought on an attack of asthma, to which she was subject. When she had received her composure, she read the following letter in French. Madame la Comtesse, the Christian feelings with which your heart is filled give me the, I feel, unpardonable boldness to write to you. I am miserable at being separated from my son. I entreat permission to see him once before my departure. Forgive me for recalling myself to your memory. I apply to you and not to Alexei Alexandrovich, simply because I do not wish to cause that generous man to suffer in remembering me. Knowing your friendship for him, I know you will understand me. Could you send Siroisa to me? Or should I come to the house at some fixed hour? Or will you let me know when and where I could see him away from home? I do not anticipate a refusal, knowing the magnanimity of him with whom it rests. You cannot conceive the craving I have to see him, and so cannot conceive the gratitude your help will arouse in me. Anna. Everything in this letter exasperated Countess Lydia Ivanovna, its contents and the allusion to magnanimity, and especially its free and easy, as she considered, tone. Say that there is no answer, said Countess Lydia Ivanovna, and immediately opening her blotting book, she wrote to Alexei Alexandrovich that she hoped to see him at 1 o'clock at the levee. I must talk with you of a grave and painful subject. There we will arrange where to meet, best of all at my house, where I will order tea as you like it. Urgent. He lays the cross, but he gives the strength to bear it, she added, so as to give him some slight preparation. Countess Lydia Ivanovna usually wrote some 2 or 3 letters a day to Alexei Alexandrovich. She enjoyed that form of communication, which gave opportunity for a refinement and air of mystery not afforded by their personal interviews. End of chapter 23. Okay, so we have a little bit more information about Lydia. Lydia. Okay, so she is married, but doesn't love her husband. But rather she loves, it seems like she has these infatuations with other people, depending on, the situation that she met them or what have you. And so she is now finding that she is falling in love, if not already in love, with Alexei. And it's not because of his very white hands with swollen veins, which is such a specific description that, of course, I remember that. And it is not because of, and she lists a couple things of Alexei. It's not because of his high, thin voice, things like that. But it is because, and I think she just really enjoys seeing, like being able to see immediately the impact that she's having on other people. So she is helping Alexei, and she is seeing in Alexei, in his face, in his mannerisms, that she is helping. So that is what she is falling in love with. But she knows that Anna and Vronsky are back in Petersburg, and she is trying to shield Alexei from it as much as possible. But Anna writes a letter to Lydia, specifically to Lydia, as Anna said, so that she does not cause more anguish on the very generous Alexei. But she writes to Lydia asking to see Siroiza, Anna's son. And she wants to see Siroiza before she leaves. And she's like, I know that the answer will be a positive because of who you are as a person and your beliefs, all of these things. And Lydia tells, the courier to tell, to pass along that there is no response. And she immediately starts writing to Alexei, which, what is your play here? Are you just trying to wedge even more between Anna and Alexei? Like, is that what you're trying to do? I don't know. I don't know what the I mean, I guess the benefit would be just for her. I guess. I guess. I don't know. I have no answers. I guess we should keep reading. And then we'll find out. Chapter 24. The levee was drawing to a close. People met as they were going away and gossiped of the latest news, of the newly bestowed honors and the changes in the positions of the higher functionaries. If only Countess Maria Borisovna were Minister of War and Princess Vatkovska were Commander-in-Chief, said a gray-headed little old man in a gold-embroidered uniform, addressing a tall, handsome maid of honor who had questioned him about the new appointments. And me among the adjutants, said the maid of honor, smiling. You have an appointment already. You're over the ecclesiastical department and your assistant's Karenin. Good day, Prince, said the little old man to a man who came up to him. What were you saying of Karenin? Said the prince. He and Putyatov have received the Alexander Nevsky. I thought he had it already. No, just look at him, said the little old man, pointing with his embroidered hat to Karenin in a court uniform with the new red ribbon across his shoulders. Standing in the doorway of the hall with an influential member of the Imperial Council. Pleased and happy as a brass farthing, he added, stopping to shake hands with a handsome gentleman of the bedchamber of colossal proportions. No, he's looking older, said the gentleman of the bedchamber. From overwork. He's always drawing up projects nowadays. He won't let a poor devil go nowadays till he's explained it all to him under heads. Looking older, did you say? Il fait des péchons. I believe Countess Lydia Ivanovna's jealous now of his wife. Oh, come now. Please don't say any harm of Countess Lydia Ivanovna. Why? Is there any harm in her being in love with Karenin? But is it true Madame Karenina's here? Well, not here in the palace, but in Petersburg. I met her yesterday with Alexei Vronsky. In Morsky. C'est un homme qui n'est pas, said the gentleman of the bedchamber, was beginning, but he stopped to make room, bowing, for a member of the imperial family to pass. Thus people talked incessantly of Alexei Alexandrovich, finding fault with him and laughing at him while he, blocking up the way of the member of the imperial council he had captured, was explaining to him, point by point, his new financial project, never interrupting his discourse for an instant for fear he should escape. Almost at the same time that his wife left Alexei Alexandrovich, there had come to him that bitterest moment in the life of an official, the moment when his upward career comes to a full stop. This full stop had arrived, and everyone perceived it, but Alexei Alexandrovich himself was not yet aware that his career was over. Whether it was due to his feud with Stremov, or his misfortune with his wife, or simply that Alexei Alexandrovich had reached his destined limits, it had become evident to everyone in the course of that year that his career was at an end. He still filled a position of consequence. He sat on many commissions and committees, but he was a man whose days was over, and from whom nothing was expected. Whatever he said, whatever he proposed, was heard as though it were something long familiar, and the very thing that was not needed. But Alexei Alexandrovich was not aware of this, and, on the contrary, being cut off from direct participation in governmental activity, he saw more clearly than ever the errors and defects in the action of others, and thought it his duty to point out means for their correction. Shortly after his separation from his wife, he began writing his first note on the new judicial procedure, the first of the endless series of notes he was destined to write in the future. Alexei Alexandrovich did not merely fail to observe his hopeless position in the official world. He was not merely free from anxiety on his head. He was positively more satisfied than ever with his own activity. He that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife, said the apostle Paul. And Alexei Alexandrovich, who was now guided in every action by Scripture, often recalled this text. It seemed to him that ever since he had been left without a wife, he had in these very projects of reform been serving the Lord more zealously than before. The unmistakable impatience of the member of the council trying to get away from him did not trouble Alexei Alexandrovich. He gave up his exposition only when the member of the council, seizing his chance when one of the imperial family was passing, slipped away from him. Left alone, Alexei Alexandrovich looked down, collecting his thoughts, then looked casually about him and walked towards the door, where he hoped to meet Countess Lydia Ivanovna. And how strong they all are, how sound physically, thought Alexei Alexandrovich, looking at the powerfully built gentleman of the bedchamber with his well-combed, perfumed whiskers, and at the red neck of the prince, pinched by his tight uniform. He had to pass them on his way. Truly, it is said that all the world is evil, he thought, with another sidelong glance at the calves of the gentleman of the bedchamber. Moving forward deliberately, Alexey Alexandrovitch bowed with his customary air of wariness and dignity to the gentleman who had been talking about him, and looking towards the door, his eyes sought Countess Lydia Ivanovna. "Ah, Alexey Alexandrovitch," said the little old man with a malicious light in his eyes at the moment when Karenin was on a level with them, and was nodding with a frigid gesture. "I have congratulated you yet," said the old man, pointing to his newly received ribbon. "Thank you," answered Alexey Alexandrovitch. "What an exquisite day today," he added, laying emphasis in his peculiar way on the word exquisite. That they laughed at him he was well aware, but he did not expect anything but hostility from them. He was used to that by now. Catching sight of the yellow shoulders of Lydia Ivanovna jutting out above her corset, and her fine pensive eyes bidding him to her, Alexey Alexandrovitch smiled, revealing untarnished white teeth, and went towards her. Lydia Ivanovna's dress had cost her great pains, as indeed all her dresses had done of late. Her aim in dress was now quite the reverse of that she had pursued 30 years before. Then her desire had been to adorn herself with something, and the more adorned, the better. Now, on the contrary, she was perforce decked out in a way so inconsistent with her age and her figure that her one anxiety was to contrive that the contrast between these adornments and her own exterior should not be too appalling. And as far as Alexey Alexandrovitch was concerned, she succeeded, and was in his eyes attractive. For him, she was the one island not only of goodwill to him, but of love in the midst of the sea of hostility and jeering that surrounded him. Passing through rows of ironical eyes, he was drawn as naturally to her loving glance as a plant to the sun. "I congratulate you," she said to him, her eyes on his ribbon. Suppressing a smile of pleasure, he shrugged his shoulders, closing his eyes, as though to say that that could not be a source of joy to him. Countess Lydia Ivanovna was very well aware that it was one of his chief sources of satisfaction, though he never admitted it. "How is our angel?" said Countess Lydia Ivanovna, meaning Siroisa. "I can't say I was quite pleased with him," said Alexey Alexandrovitch, raising his eyebrows and opening his eyes. "And Sitnikov is not satisfied with him." Sitnikov was the tutor to whom Siroisa's secular education had been entrusted. "As I have mentioned to you, there's a sort of coldness in him towards the most important questions, which ought to touch the heart of every man and every child." Alexey Alexandrovitch began expounding his views on the sole question that interested him, besides the service, the education of his son. When Alexey Alexandrovitch, with Lydia Ivanovna's help, had been brought back anew to life and activity, he felt it his duty to undertake the education of the son left on his hands. Having never before taken any interest in educational questions, Alexey Alexandrovitch devoted some time to the theoretical study of the subject. After reading several books on anthology, education, and didactics, Alexey Alexandrovitch drew up a plan of education, and engaging the best tutor in Petersburg to superintend it, he set to work, and the subject continually absorbed him. "Yes, but the heart. I see in him his father's heart, and with such a heart a child cannot go far wrong," said Lydia Ivanovna with enthusiasm. "Yes, perhaps. As for me, I do my duty. It's all I can do." "Oh, you're coming to me," said Countess Lydia Ivanovna after a pause. "We have to speak of a subject painful for you. I would give anything to have spared you certain memories, but others are not of the same mind. I have received a letter from her. She is here in Petersburg." Alexei Alexandrovich shuddered at the allusion to his wife, but immediately his face assumed the death-like rigidity with which expressed utter helplessness in the matter. "I was expecting it," he said. Countess Lydia Ivanovna looked at him ecstatically, and tears of rapture at the greatness of his soul came into her eyes. End of chapter 24. Okay, so now we are at like a business event, a business gathering, like a business dinner type of a thing, a celebration. So Alexei has a new ribbon to put on his jacket, new bragging rights, all of these types of things. But before we even get to Alexei, we have a bunch of coworkers and other officials, and they are talking about Alexei. They know about him. They know what is happening. And they also know that they're kind of trying to make Alexei unimportant, substantial, I guess. So like his position, he's not really going to be like doing much. He's not going to really be having any responsibilities. He's not really going to actually be working or having any say. And Alexei kind of knows this, but not really. And it wasn't said exactly why. It wasn't said if it was because of the feud of the last business that he was involved in, or if it's because of the whole situation with Anna. But he is on committees and he is on like commissions and things like that. But his actual position is he's just sort of being pushed aside. And so, let's see what else. And also at the event, Lydia Ivanovna is there. And so she tells him, okay, I have to tell you something deeply upsetting. Which, why? Why do you have to tell him this? Anna specifically told you, not Alexei, because she didn't want to upset him. It's fine. But Lydia's like, I have to tell you something very upsetting. She is here. She is in Petersburg. Oh. And that's where it ended. We also do get a tiny, tiny glimmer into Alexei being concerned over his son Siroiza's education, and he hasn't really had much of a say or any interest or anything like that, any oversight in his education, and so he is now seeing just how, like, the things that he's lacking in, that sort of thing, and the things that, like, his tutor is lacking. That sort of thing. Chapter 25. When Alexei Alexandrovich came into the Countess Lydia Ivanovna's snug little boudoir, decorated with old china and hung with portraits, the lady herself had not yet made her appearance. She was changing her dress. A cloth was laid on a round table, and on it stood a china tea service and a silver spirit lamp and tea kettle. Alexei Alexandrovich looked idly about at the endless familiar portraits which adorned the room, and sitting down to the table, he opened a New Testament lying upon it. The rustle of the Countess's silk skirt drew his attention off. "Well, now, we can sit quietly," said Countess Lydia Ivanovna, slipping hurriedly with an agitated smile between the table and the sofa, and talk over our tea. After some words of preparation, Countess Lydia Ivanovna, breathing hard and flushing crimson, gave into Alexei Alexandrovich's hands the letter she had received. After reading the letter, he sat a long while in silence. "I don't think I have the right to refuse her," he said, timidly lifting his eyes. "Dear friend, you never see evil in anyone." "On the contrary, I see that all is evil, but whether it is just—" His face showed irresolution and a seeking for counsel, support, and guidance in a matter he did not understand. No, Countess Lydia Ivanovna interrupted him. There are limits to everything. I can understand immortality, she said, not quite truthfully, since she never could understand that which leads women to immortality. But I don't understand cruelty. To whom? To you? How can she stay in the town where you are? No, the longer one lives, the more one learns. And I'm learning to understand your loftiness and her baseness. Who is to throw a stone? Said Alexei Alexandrovitch, unmistakably pleased with the part he had to play. I had forgiven all, and so I cannot deprive her of what is exacted by love in her, by her love for her son. But is that love, my friend? Is it sincere? Admitting that you have forgiven, that you forgive, have we the right to work on the feelings of that angel? He looks on her as dead. He prays for her and beseeches God to have mercy on her sins, and it is better so. But now, what will he think? I had not thought of that, said Alexei Alexandrovitch, evidently agreeing. Countess Lydia Ivanovna hid her face in her hands and was silent. She was praying. If you ask my advice, she said, having finished her prayer and uncovered her face, I do not advise you to do this. Do you suppose I don't see how you are suffering, how this has torn open your wounds? But supposing that, as always, you don't think of yourself, what can it lead to? To fresh suffering for you, to torture your child. If there were a trace of humanity left in her, she ought not to wish for it herself. No, I have no hesitation in saying I advise not. And if you will entrust it to me, I will write to her. And Alexei Alexandrovitch consented. And Countess Lydia Ivanovna sent the following letter in French. Dear Madam, to be reminded of you might have results for your son in leading to questions on his part which could not be answered without implanting in the child's soul a spirit of censure towards what should be for him sacred, and therefore I beg you to interpret your husband's refusal in the spirit of Christian love. I pray to Almighty God to have mercy on you. Countess Lydia. This letter attained the secret object which Countess Lydia Ivanovna had concealed from herself. It wounded Anna to the quick. For his part, Alexei Alexandrovitch, on returning home from Lydia Ivanovna's, could not all that day concentrate himself on his usual pursuits, and find that spiritual peace of one saved and believing which he had felt of late. The thought of his wife, who had so greatly sinned against him, and towards whom he had been so saintly, as Countess Lydia Ivanovna had so justly told him, ought not to have troubled him. But he was not easy. He could not understand the book he was reading. He could not drive away harassing recollections of his relations with her, of the mistake which, as it now seemed, he had made in regard to her. The memory of how he had received her confession of infidelity on their way home from the races, especially that he insisted only on the observance of external decorum and had not sent a challenge, tortured him like a remorse. He was tortured, too, by the thought of the letter he had written her, and most of all, his forgiveness, which nobody wanted, and his care of the other man's child made his heart burn with shame and remorse. And just the same feeling of shame and regret he felt now, as he reviewed all his past with her, recalling the awkward words in which, after long wavering, he had made her an offer. But how have I been to blame? He said to himself, and this question always excited another question in him. whether they felt differently, did their loving and marrying differently. These Vronskys and Oblonskys, these gentlemen of the bedchamber and their fine calves. And there passed before his mind a whole series of these mettlesome, vigorous, self-confident men, who always and everywhere drew his inquisitive attention in spite of himself. He tried to dispel these thoughts. He tried to persuade himself that he was not living for this transient life, but for the life of eternity, and that there was peace and love in his heart. But the fact that he had in this transient, trivial life made, as it seemed to him, a few trivial mistakes, tortured him as though the eternal salvation in which he believed had no existence. But this temptation did not last long, and soon there was re-established once more in Alexei Alexandrovich's soul, the peace and the elevation by virtue of which he could not forget what he did not want to remember. End of chapter 25. Ooh, okay, chapter 25. So Alexei meets up with Lydia in her chamber, and they sit down to tea, and Lydia tells him, she is here. She wrote me this letter. Here, read it. So he reads it, and he's like, I can't deny her. I can't deny her seeing her son. Like, that's just how it has to be. And Lydia just wiggles her little self in and convinces him that Anna should not see her son. That no, actually, you need to say no, and I would write it for you if you allow me to. And Alexia is like, yeah, okay, sure. So she writes the note, and it is not scathing, but it is not nice. And she writes it knowing that it is going to hurt Anna. She writes it in such a way, and the content, of course, knows that it is going to hurt Anna. And so Alexei is, of course, having his internal monologue, or his internal dialogue, rather, about the changes in how he feels differently and how the relationship that Anna is having with, Vronsky is different than the relationship that she had with Alexei, and how Vronsky is dealing with this, or how can he deal with this, like questioning things like that, or how Oblonsky can do this same life, and he just doesn't really understand it. And he knows that he is not living for this transient life, but rather he is living for the life after, the eternal life. But he's here currently in the transient life, and he knows that in this life he has made mistakes. And so now he is living with those missteps. Interesting. It brings Lydia such joy to be the person who writes the letter to tell Anna, no. No. You don't get to see your son. And also the fact that she put in that it is Alexei's wish, I think is interesting as well. Because now it's obvious that she did tell Alexei. Interesting. Let's just blame Lydia. Done. Problem solved. Chapter 26. Well, Kapitonich, said Siroiza, coming back rosy and good-humored from his walk the day before his birthday, and giving his overcoat to the tall, old hall porter, who smiled down at the little person from the height of his long figure. Well, has the bandaged clerk been here today? Did Papa see him? He saw him. The minute the chief secretary came out, I announced him, said the hall porter with a good-humored wink. Here, I'll take it off. Siroiza, said the tutor, stopping in the doorway leading to the inner rooms. Take it off yourself. But Siroiza, though he heard his tutor's feeble voice, did not pay attention to it. He stood keeping hold of the hall porter's belt and gazing into his face. Well, did Papa do what he wanted for him? The hall porter nodded his head affirmatively. The clerk with his face tied up, who had already been 7 times to ask some favor of Alexei Alexandrovich, interested both Siroiza and the hall porter. Siroiza had come upon him in the hall and had heard him plaintively beg the hall porter to announce him, saying that he and his children had death staring them in the face. Since then, Siroiza, having met him a 2nd time in the hall, took great interest in him. Well, was he very glad? He asked. Glad? I should think so, almost dancing as he walked away. And has anything been left? Asked Siroiza after a pause. Come, sir, said the hall porter. Then, with a shake of his head, he whispered, Something from the Countess. Siroiza understood at once that what the hall porter was speaking of was a present from Countess Lydia Ivanovna for his birthday. What do you say? Where? Corny took it to your papa. A fine plaything it must be, too. How big? Like this? Rather small, but a fine thing. A book? No, a thing. Run along, run along. Vasily Lukitch is calling you, said the porter, hearing the tutor's step approaching, and carefully taking away from his belt the little hand in the glove half pulled off. He signed with his head toward the tutor. Vasily Lukitch. In a tiny minute, answered Siroiza, with that happy, loving smile which always won over the conscientious Vasily Lukitch. Siroiza was too happy. Everything was too delightful for him to be able to help sharing with his friend, the porter, the family good fortune of which he had heard during his walk in the public gardens from Lydia Ivanovna's niece. This piece of good news seemed to him particularly important, from its coming at the same time with the gladness of the bandaged clerk and his own gladness at toys having come for him. It seemed to Siroiza that this was a day on which everyone ought to be glad and happy. You know Papa's received the Alexander Nevsky today? To be sure I do. People have already to congratulate him. And is he glad? Glad at the Tsar's gracious favor. I should think so. It's a proof he's deserved it, said the porter severely and seriously. Siroiza fell to dreaming, gazing up at the face of the porter, which he had thoroughly studied in every detail, especially the chin that hung down between the gray whiskers, never seen by anyone but Siroiza, who saw him only from below. Well, and has your daughter been to see you lately? The porter's daughter was a ballet dancer. When is she to come on weekdays? They've their lesson to learn, too, and you've your lesson, sir. Run along. On coming into the room, Siroiza, instead of sitting down to his lessons, told his tutor of his supposition that what had been brought him must be a machine. What do you think? He inquired. But Vasily Lukitch was thinking of nothing but the necessity of learning the grammar lesson for the teacher, who was coming at 2. No, do just tell me, Vasily Lukitch, he asked suddenly, when he was seated at their work table with a book in his hand. What is greater than the Alexander Nevsky? You know Papa's received the Alexander Nevsky? Vasily Lukitch replied that the Vladimir was greater than the Alexander Nevsky. And higher still? Well, highest of all is the Andrei Pervozvany. And higher than an Andrei? I don't know. What? You don't know? Said Siroisa, leaning on his elbows, sank into deep meditation. His meditations were of the most complex and diverse character. He imagined his father's having suddenly been presented with both the Vladimir and the Andrei today, and in consequence being much better tempered at his lesson, and dreamed how, when he was grown up, he would himself receive all the orders and what they might invent higher than the Andrei. Directly any higher order were invented, he would win it. They would make a higher one still, and he would immediately win that too. The time passed in such meditations, and when the teacher came, the lesson about the adverbs of place and time and manner of action was not ready, and the teacher was not only displeased, but hurt. This touched Siroisa. He felt he was not to blame for not having learned the lesson, however much he tried. He was utterly unable to do that. As long as the teacher was explaining to him, he believed him and seemed to comprehend. But as soon as he was left alone, he was positively unable to recollect and to understand that the short and familiar word suddenly is an adverb of manner, of action. Still, he was sorry that he had disappointed the teacher. He chose a moment when the teacher was looking in silence at the book. Mihail Ivanitch, when is your birthday? He asked all of a sudden. You'd much better be thinking about your work. Birthdays are of no importance to a rational being. It's a day like any other on which one has to do one's work. Siroisa looked intently at the teacher, at his scanty beard, at his spectacles, which had slipped down below the ridge on his nose, and fell into so deep a reverie that he heard nothing of what the teacher was explaining to him. He knew that the teacher did not think what he said. He felt it from the tone in which it was said. But why have they all agreed to speak just in the same manner, always the dreariest and most useless stuff? Why does he keep me off? Why doesn't he love me? He asked himself mournfully, and could not think of an answer. End of chapter 26. Okay, chapter 26, we are hanging out with Siroisa, and this is like the longest we've ever hung out with Siroisa. So Siroisa is at a lesson, and he is asking questions. Apparently, it's also his birthday, and Lydia Ivanovna left him a present. And so Siroisa is at a lesson and asking questions about the honor ribbon recognition that his dad, Alexei, has gotten. And is like, okay, well, what's higher than that? Well, what's higher than that? You know how kids are. What's higher than that? And in his head, Siroisa is like, I'm going to get the highest of honors. I'm going to do it. And when they invent another one, I'm going to snatch up that one too. And so he's not really paying attention to the lesson, but we also, from Siroisa's point, know that the tutor is just not like fully in it to win it, just teaching for the sake of teaching and not because like he believes it wholeheartedly or anything like that. And we do get like the tiniest little snippet of like, why doesn't my father love me? Which is, we already knew that Siroisa had to be feeling this because for so long Alexei wasn't involved at all and just didn't really care. And in a previous chapter today, Alexei was like, yeah, I had to leave dinner because I couldn't even look at my son. Excuse me? Siroisa didn't do anything. The only thing that he is guilty of is having Anna as a mom and Alexei as a dad. And that is terrible. And they probably won't even tell Siroisa that Anna wants to see him, which I hate. Oh, and didn't, what's her name, Lydia tell Siroisa that his mom is dead? That was like a quick little line that was thrown in. Like, What? She's not. She's not. She's not. All right. Chapter 27. It is very sad. I don't like that. Sorry, C. Rosa. Even the innocent are being plighted, hurt. Chapter 27. After the lesson with the grammar teacher came his father's lesson. While waiting for his father, Siroisa sat at the table playing with a penknife and fell to dreaming. Among Siroisa's favorite occupations was searching for his mother during his walks. He did not believe in death generally, and in her death in particular, in spite of what Lydia Ivanovna had told him and his father had confirmed, and it was just because of that, and after he had been told she was dead, that he had begun looking for her, even out for a walk. Every woman of full, graceful figure with dark hair was his mother. At the sight of such a woman, such a feeling of tenderness was stirred within him that his breath failed him, and the tears came into his eyes. And he was on the tiptoe of expectation that she would come up to him, would lift her veil. All her face would be visible. She would smile, she would hug him, he would sniff her fragrance, feel the softness of her arms, and cry with happiness, just as he had one evening lain upon her lap while she tickled him, and he laughed and bit her white, ring-covered fingers. Later, when he accidentally learned from his old nurse that his mother was not dead, and his father and Lydia Ivanovna had explained to him that she was dead to him because she was wicked, which he could not possibly believe because he loved her, he went on seeking her and expecting her in the same way. That day in the public gardens there had been a lady in a lilac veil, whom he had watched with a throbbing heart, believing it to be she as she came towards them along the path. The lady had not come up to them, but had disappeared somewhere. That day, more intensely than ever, Siroisa felt a rush of love for her, and now, waiting for his father, he forgot everything, and cut all round the edges of the table with his penknife, staring straight before him with sparkling eyes and dreaming of her. "Here is your papa," said Vasily Lukitch, rousing him. Siroisa jumped up and went up to his father and, kissing his hand, looked at him intently, trying to discover signs of his joy at receiving the Alexander Nevsky. "Did you have a nice walk?" said Alexei Alexandrovitch, sitting down in his easy chair, pulling the volume of the Old Testament to him and opening it. Although Alexei Alexandrovitch had more than once told Siroisa that every Christian ought to know scripture history thoroughly, he often referred to the Bible himself during the lesson, and Siroisa observed this. "Yes, it was very nice indeed, Papa," said Siroisa, sitting sideways on his chair and rocking it, which was forbidden. "I saw Nadinka." Nadinka was a niece of Lydia Ivanovna's, who was being brought up in her house. "She told me you'd been given a new star. Are you glad, Papa?" "First of all, don't rock in your chair, please," said Alexei Alexandrovitch. "And secondly, it's not the reward that's precious, but the work itself. And I could have wished you understood that. If you now are going to work to study in order to win a reward, then the work will seem hard to you. But when you work—" Alexei Alexandrovitch, as he spoke, thought of how he had been sustained by a sense of duty through the wearisome labor of the morning, consisting of signing 180 papers. "Loving your work, you will find your reward in it." Siroisa's eyes had been shining with gaiety and tenderness, grew dull, and dropped before his father's gaze. This was the same long, familiar tone his father always took with him, and Siroisa had learned by now to fall in with it. His father always talked to him, so Siroisa felt, as though he were addressing some boy of his own imagination, one of those boys that exist in books, utterly unlike himself. And Siroisa always tried with his father to act being the storybook boy. "You understand that, I hope," said his father. "Yes, Papa," answered Siroisa, acting the part of the imaginary boy. The lesson consisted of learning by heart several verses out of the Gospel and the repetition of the beginning of the Old Testament. The verses from the Gospel Siroisa knew fairly well, but at the moment when he was saying them, he became so absorbed in watching the sharply protruding, bony knobbiness of his father's forehead that he lost the thread, and he transposed the end of one verse and the beginning of another. So it was evident to Alexei Alexandrovich that he did not understand what he was saying, and that irritated him. He frowned and began explaining what Siroisa had heard many times before and never could remember because he understood it too well, just as that suddenly is an adverb of meaning of action. Siroisa looked with scared eyes at his father and could think of nothing but whether his father would make him repeat what he had said, as he sometimes did. And this thought so alarmed Siroisa that he now understood nothing. But his father did not make him repeat it, and passed on to the lesson out of the Old Testament. Siroisa recounted the events themselves well enough, but when he had to answer questions as to what certain events prefigured, he knew nothing, though he had already been punished over this lesson. The passage at which he was utterly unable to say anything, and began fidgeting and cutting the table and swinging his chair, was where he had to repeat the patriarchs before the flood. He did not know one of them except Enoch, who had been taken up alive to heaven. Last time he had remembered their names, but now he had forgotten them utterly, chiefly because Enoch was the personage he liked best in the whole of the Old Testament, and Enoch's translation to heaven was connected in his mind with a whole long train of thought, in which he became absorbed now while he gazed with fascinated eyes at his father's watch chain and a half-unbuttoned button on his waistcoat. In death, of which they talked to him so often, Siroisa disbelieved entirely. He did not believe that those he loved could die, above all, that he himself would die. That was to him something utterly inconceivable and impossible. But he had been told that all men die. He had asked people, indeed, whom he trusted, and they too had confirmed it. His old nurse, too, said the same, though reluctantly. But Enoch had not died, and so it followed that everyone did not die. "And why cannot anyone else so serve God and be taken alive to heaven?" thought Siroisa. Bad people, that is, though Siroisa did not like, they might die. But the good ones might all be like Enoch. "Well, what are the names of the patriarchs?" "Enoch, Enos..." "But you have said that already. This is bad, Siroisa, very bad. If you don't try to learn what is more necessary than anything for a Christian," said his father, getting up, "whatever can interest you. I am displeased with you and Peter Ignatius," this was the most important of his teachers, "is displeased with you. I shall have to punish you." His father and his teacher were both displeased with Siroisa, and he certainly did learn his lessons very badly. But still, it could not be said he was a stupid boy. On the contrary, he was far cleverer than the boys his teacher held up as examples to Siroisa. In his father's opinion, he did not want to learn what he was taught. In reality, he could not learn that. He could not, because the claims of his own soul were more binding on him than those claims his father and his teacher made upon him. Those claims were in opposition, and he was in direct conflict with his education. He was 9 years old. He was a child, but he knew his own soul. It was precious to him. He guarded it as the eyelid guards the eye, and without the key of love he let no one into his soul. His teachers complained that he would not learn, while his soul was brimming over with thirst for knowledge. And he learned from Kapitanich, from his nurse, from Nadinka, from Vasily Lukich, but not from his teachers. The spring his father and his teachers reckoned upon to turn their mill wheels had long dried up at the source, but its waters did their work in another channel. His father punished Siroisa by not letting him go to see Nadinka, Lydia Ivanovna's niece, but this punishment turned out happily for Siroisa. Vasily Lukich was in a good humor and showed him how to make windmills. The whole evening passed over this work, and in dreaming how to make a windmill on which he could turn himself, clutching at the sails or tying himself on and whirling around. Of his mother, Siroisa did not think all the evening, but when he had gone to bed, he suddenly remembered her, and prayed in his own words that his mother tomorrow, for his birthday, might leave off hiding herself and come to him. Vasily Lukich, do you know what I prayed for tonight extra besides the regular things? That you might learn your lessons better? No. Toys? No, you'll never guess. A splendid thing, but it's a secret. When it comes to pass, I'll tell you. Can't you guess? No, I can't guess. You tell me, said Vasily Lukich with a smile, which was rare with him. Come, lie down, I'm putting out the candle. Without the candle, I can see better what I see and what I prayed for. There, I was almost telling the secret, said Siroisa, laughing. When the candle was taken away, Siroisa heard and felt his mother. She stood over him and with loving eyes caressed him. But then came windmills, a knife. Everything began to be mixed up, and he fell asleep. End of chapter 27. All right, chapter 27, we have Siroisa. And okay, so yes, Lydia Ivanovna and Alexei told Siroisa that Anna is dead. But he heard from a servant that she's not actually dead, that Lydia and Alexei told him that because Anna had done something bad. And so he is just hoping so much that she comes back. And when he goes on walks, every woman that he sees who kind of looks like her, like is about the same height, has darker hair, he's just hoping so much that she's Anna. And he just wants her to be there. He wants her to be there for his birthday, which is tomorrow. And that's the wish that he has, or that's what he prays for going to bed that night, is just on top of all of the other like normal things. He just so wants to see his mom again, which is really sad. Anna also wants to see him. Anna has requested to see him before she leaves again. And Alexia originally said yes, and then Lydia Ivanovna is like, no. So Alexia said no. So sad. And also interesting, we get a child's perspective. I think they said he was 9 or 8. A child's perspective of death and what that is, and grabbing from, the Old Testament, and how Enoch didn't actually die to go up to heaven, and so he thinks that that's what happens to all of the good people, and all of the bad people actually die. But he doesn't really understand death like a lot of children don't really understand it. So that's also interesting, and I feel like there's a lot of foreshadowing that happens in this. I don't know why there was a knife involved in his dreams. Obviously windmills, he just talked about windmills. Obviously his mom, he misses his mom so much. But why was there a knife? What is happening? What is going on? Siroisa, my gosh. All right, chapter 28. On arriving in Petersburg, Vronsky and Anna stayed at one of the best hotels. Vronsky apart in a lower story, Anna above with her child, its nurse and her maid in a large suite of 4 rooms. On the day of his arrival, Vronsky went to his brother's. There he found his mother, who had come from Moscow on business. His mother and sister-in-law greeted him as usual. They asked him about his stay abroad and talked of their common acquaintances, but did not let drop a single word in allusion to his connection with Anna. His brother came the next morning to see Vronsky, and of his own accord asked him about her. And Alexei Vronsky told him directly that he looked upon his connection with Madame Karenina as marriage, that he hoped to arrange a divorce and then to marry her, and until then he considered her as much a wife as any other wife, and he begged him to tell their mother and his wife so. "If the world disapproves, I don't care," said Vronsky. "But if my relations want to be on terms of relationship with me, they will have to be on the same terms with my wife." The elder brother, who had always a respect for his younger brother's judgment, could not well tell whether he was right or not till the world had decided the question. For his part, he had nothing against it, and with Alexei he went up to see Anna. Before his brother, as before everyone, Vronsky addressed Anna with a certain formality, treating her as he might a very intimate friend. But it was understood that his brother knew their real relations, and they talked about Anna's going to Vronsky's estate. In spite of all his social experience, Vronsky was, in consequence of the new position in which he was placed, laboring under a strange misapprehension. One would have thought he must have understood that society was closed for him and Anna. But now some vague ideas had sprung up in his brain that this was only the case in old-fashioned days, and that now, with the rapidity of modern progress, he had unconsciously become by now a partisan of every sort of progress. The views of society had changed, and that the question whether they would be received in society was not a foregone conclusion. Of course, he thought, she would not be received at court, but intimate friends can and must look at it in the proper light. One may sit for several hours at a stretch with one's legs crossed in the same position if one knows that there's nothing to prevent one's changing one's position. But if a man knows that he must remain sitting so with crossed legs, then cramps come on. The legs begin to twitch and to strain towards the spot to which one would like to draw them. This was what Vronsky was expecting in regard to the world, though at the bottom of his heart he knew that the world was shut on them. He put it to the test whether the world had not changed by now and would not receive them. But he very quickly perceived that, though the world was open for him personally, it was closed for Anna. Just as in the game of cat and mouse, the hands raised for him were dropped to bar the way for Anna. One of the first ladies of Petersburg society whom Vronsky saw was his cousin, Betsy. "Oh, at last," she greeted him joyfully. "And Anna, how glad I am! Where are you stopping? I can fancy after your delightful travels you must find our poor Petersburg horrid. I can fancy your honeymoon in Rome. How about the divorce? Is that all over?" Vronsky noticed that Betsy's enthusiasm waned when she learned that no divorce had, as yet, taken place. "People will throw stones at me, I know," she said, "but I shall come and see Anna. Yes, I shall certainly come. You won't be here long, I suppose?" And she did certainly come to see Anna the same day. But her tone was not at all the same as in former days. She unmistakably prided herself on her courage and wished Anna to appreciate the fidelity of her friendship. She only stayed 10 minutes, talking of society gossip, and on leaving, she said, "You've never told me when the divorce is to be. Supposing I'm ready to fling my cap over the mill, other starchy people will give you the cold shoulder until you're married. And that's so simple nowadays. Qu'est-ce fait? So you're going on Friday?" Sorry, we shan't see each other again." From Betsy's tone, Vronsky might have grasped what he had to expect from the world. But he made another effort in his own family. His mother he did not reckon upon. He knew that his mother, who had been so enthusiastic over Anna at their first acquaintance, would have no mercy on her now for having ruined her son's career. But he had more hope of Varya, his brother's wife. He fancied she would not throw stones, and would go simply and directly to see Anna, and would receive her in her own house. The day after his arrival, Vronsky went to her, and finding her alone, expressed his wishes directly. "You know, Alexei," she said after hearing him, "how fond I am of you, and how ready I am to do anything for you, but I have not spoken, because I knew I could be of no use to you and to Anna Arkadyevna," she said, articulating the name Anna Arkadyevna with particular care. "Don't suppose, please, that I judge her. Never. Perhaps in her place I should have done the same. I don't and can't enter into that," she said, glancing timidly at his gloomy face. "But one must call things by their names. You want me to go and see her, to ask her here, and to rehabilitate her in society. But do understand that I cannot do so. I have daughters growing up, and I must live in the world for my husband's sake. Well, I'm ready to come and see Anna Arkadyevna. She will understand that I can't ask her here, or I should have to do so in such a way that she would not meet people who look at things differently. That would offend her. I can't raise her. Oh, I don't regard her as fallen more than hundreds of women you do receive, Vronsky interrupted her, still more gloomily, and he got up in silence, understanding that his sister-in-law's decision was not to be shaken. "Oh, Alexei, don't be angry with me. Please understand that I'm not to blame," began Varya, looking at him with a timid smile. "I'm not angry with you," he said, still as gloomily, "but I'm sorry in two ways. I'm sorry, too, that this means breaking up our friendship. If not breaking up, at least weakening it. You will understand that for me, too, it cannot be otherwise." And with that, he left her. Vronsky knew that further efforts were useless, and that he had to spend these few days in Petersburg, as though in a strange town, avoiding every sort of relation with his own old circle, in order not to be exposed to the annoyances and humiliations which were so intolerable to him. One of the most unpleasant features of his position in Petersburg was that Alexei Alexandrovitch and his name seemed to meet him everywhere. He could not begin to talk of anything without the conversation turning on Alexei Alexandrovitch. He could not go anywhere without risk of meeting him. So at least it seemed to Vronsky, just as it seems to a man with a sore finger that he is continually, as though on purpose, grazing his sore finger on everything. Their stay in Petersburg was the more painful to Vronsky than he perceived all the time a sort of new mood that he could not understand in Anna. At one time she would seem in love with him, and then she would become cold, irritable, and impenetrable. She was worrying over something, and keeping something back from him, and did not seem to notice the humiliations which poisoned his existence, and for her, with her delicate intuition, must have been still more unbearable. Okay, they're back in Petersburg. And they're kind of like tiptoeing around just because society will not let them just be. Like there's rules with their roles and things like that. And so Vronsky is trying to get Anna to be able to go to the house, to Alexei Alexandrovich's house, so that she can see her son. And Varya is like, I can't do that because being seen with Anna is like not great. And so Vronsky is also seeing that he doesn't really have anybody to rely on. Oops. Chapter 29. One of Anna's objects in coming back to Russia had been to see her son. From the day she left Italy, the thought of it had never ceased to agitate her, and as she got nearer to Petersburg, the delight and importance of this meeting grew ever greater in her imagination. She did not even put to herself the question how to arrange it. It seemed to her natural and simple to see her son when she could be in the same town with him, but on her arrival in Petersburg she was suddenly made distinctly aware of her present position in society, and she grasped the fact that to arrange this meeting was no easy matter. She had now been 2 days in Petersburg. The thought of her son never left her for a single instant, but she had not yet seen him. To go straight to the house where she might meet Alexei Alexandrovitch, that she felt she had no right to do. She might be refused admittance and insulted. To write and so enter into relations with her husband, that it made her miserable to think of doing. She could only be at peace when she did not think of her husband. To get a glimpse of her son out walking, finding out where and when he went out, was not enough for her. She had so looked forward to this meeting. She had so much she must say to him, so she longed to embrace him, to kiss him. Seroiza's old nurse might be a help to her and show her what to do, but the nurse was not now living in Alexei Alexandrovitch's house. In this uncertainty and in efforts to find the nurse, 2 days had slipped by. Hearing of the close intimacy between Alexei Alexandrovitch and Countess Lydia Ivanovna, Anna decided on the 3rd day to write her a letter, which cost her great pains, and in which she intentionally said that permission to see her son must depend on her husband's generosity. She knew that if the letter were shown to her husband, he would keep up his character of magnanimity and would not refuse her request. The commissioner who took the letter had brought her back the most cruel and unexpected answer: that there was no answer. She had never felt so humiliated as at the moment when, sending for the commissioner, she heard from him the exact account of how he had waited, and how afterwards he had been told there was no answer. Anna felt humiliated, insulted, but she saw that from her point of view Countess Lydia Ivanovna was right. Her suffering was the more poignant that she had to bear it in solitude. She could not and would not share it with Vronsky. She knew that to him, although he was the primary cause of her distress, the question of her seeing her son would seem a matter of very little consequence. She knew that he would never be capable of understanding all the depth of her suffering, that for his cool tone at any allusion to it she would begin to hate him, and she dreaded that more than anything in the world, and so she hid from him everything that related to her son. Spending the whole day at home, she considered ways of seeing her son, and had reached a decision to write to her husband. She was just composing this letter when she was handed the letter from Lydia Ivanovna. The Countess's silence had subdued and depressed her, but the letter, all that she read between the lines in it, so exasperated her. This malice was so revolting beside her passionate, legitimate tenderness for her son, that she turned against other people and left off blaming herself. This coldness, this pretense of feeling, she said to herself. They must needs insult me and torture the child, and I am to submit to it. Not on any consideration. She is worse than I am. I don't lie, anyway. And she decided on the spot that next day, Seroiza's birthday, she would go straight to her husband's house, bribe or deceive the servants, but at any cost see her son and overturn the hideous deception with which they were encompassing the unhappy child. She went to a toy shop, bought toys, and thought over a plan of action. She would go early in the morning at 8 o'clock, when Alexei Alexandrovitch would be certain not to be up. She would have money in her hand to give the hall porter and the footman, so that they should let her in, and not raising her veil, she would say that she had come from Siroisa's godfather to congratulate him, and that she had been charged to leave the toys at his bedside. She had prepared everything but the words she would say to her son. Often as she had dreamed of it, she could never think of anything. The next day at 8 o'clock in the morning, Anna got out of a hired sledge and rang at the front entrance of her former home. "Run and see what's wanted. Some lady," said Kapitanich, who, not yet dressed in his overcoat and galoshes, had peeped out of the window and seen a lady in a veil standing close up to the door. His assistant, a lad Anna did not know, had no sooner opened the door to her than she came in and, pulling a 3-ruble note out of her muff, put it hurriedly into his hand. "Siroisa, Sergei Alexeyevich," she said, and was going on. Scrutinizing the note, the porter's assistant stopped her at the second glass door. "Whom do you want?" he asked. She did not answer his words and made no answer. Noticing the embarrassment of the unknown lady, Kapitanich went out to her, opened the second door for her, and asked her what she was pleased to want. "From Prince Skorodomov for Sergei Alexeyevich. There we go," she said. "His honor's not up yet," said the porter, looking at her attentively. Anna had not anticipated that the absolutely unchanged hall of the house where she had lived for 9 years would be so greatly affected her. Memories sweet and painful rose one after another in her heart, and for a moment she forgot what she was here for. "Would you kindly wait?" said Kapitanich, taking off her fur cloak. As she took off the cloak, Kapitanich glanced at her face, recognized her, and made her a low bow in silence. "Please walk in, Your Excellency," he said to her. She tried to say something, but her voice refused to utter any sound. With a guilty and imploring glance at the old man, she went with light, swift steps up the stairs. Bent double and his galoshes catching in the steps, Kapitanich ran after her, trying to overtake her. "The tutor's there. Maybe he's not dressed. I'll let him know." Anna still mounted the familiar staircase, not understanding what the old man was saying. "This way, to the left, if you please. Excuse, it's not being tidy. His honor's in the old parlor now," the hall porter said, panting. "Excuse me, wait a little, Your Excellency. I'll just see," he said. And overtaking her, he opened the high door and disappeared behind it. Anna stood still, waiting. "He's only just awake," said the hall porter, coming out. And at the very instant the porter said this, Anna caught the sound of a childish yawn. From the sound of this yawn alone she knew her son, and seemed to see him living before her eyes. "Let me go in. Go away," she said, and went in through the high doorway. On the right of the door stood a bed, and sitting up in the bed was the boy. His little body bent forward with his nightshirt unbuttoned. He was stretching and still yawning. The instant his lips came together, they curved into a blissfully sleepy smile, and with that smile he slowly and deliciously rolled back again. "Siroisa," she whispered, going noiselessly up to him. When she was parted from him, and all this latter time, when she had been feeling a fresh rush of love for him, she had pictured him as he was at 4 years old, when she had loved him most of all. Now he was not even the same as when she had left him. He was still further from the 4-year-old baby, more grown and thinner. How thin his face was, how short was his hair, how long hands, how he had changed since she left him. But it was he, with his head, his lips, his soft neck and broad little shoulders. "Siroisa," she repeated, just in the child's ear. He raised himself again on his elbow, turned his tangled head from side to side as though looking for something, and opened his eyes. Slowly and inquiringly, he looked for several seconds at his mother standing motionless before him. Then, all at once, he smiled a blissful smile, and shutting his eyes, rolled not backwards, but towards her, into her arms. "See Roysa, my darling boy," she said, breathing hard and putting her arms round his plump little body. "Mother," he said, wriggling about in her arms so as not to touch her hands with different parts of him. Smiling sleepily, still with closed eyes, he flung fat little arms round her shoulders, rolled towards her with the delicious sleepy warmth and fragrance that is only found in children, and began rubbing his face against her neck and shoulders. "I know," he said, opening his eyes. "It's my birthday today. I knew you'd come. I'll get up directly." And saying that, he dropped asleep. Anna looked at him hungrily. She saw how he had grown and changed in her absence. She knew and did not know. The bare legs, so long now, that were thrust out below the quilt, those short, cropped curls on his neck in which she had so often kissed him. She touched all this and could say nothing. Tears choked her. "What are you crying for, Mother?" he said, waking completely up. "Mother, what are you crying for?" he cried in a tearful voice. "I won't cry. I'm crying for joy. It's so long since I've seen you. I won't, she said, gulping down her tears and turning away. "Come, it's time for you to dress now," she said, after a pause, and, never letting go of his hands, she sat down by his bedside on the chair, where his clothes were put ready for him. "How do you dress without me? How?" She tried to begin talking simply and cheerfully, but she could not, and again she turned away. "I don't have a cold bath. Papa didn't order it. And you've not seen Vasily Lukitch? He'll come in soon. Why, you're sitting on my clothes." And Seroisa went off into a peal of laughter. He looked at him and smiled. "Mother, darling, sweet one," he shouted, flinging himself on her again and hugging her. It was as though only now, on seeing her smile, he fully grasped what had happened. "I don't want that on," he said, taking off her hat, and as it were, seeing her afresh without her hat, he fell to kissing her again. "But what did you think about me? You didn't think I was dead? I never believed it." "You didn't believe it, my sweet." I knew, he repeated his favorite phrase, and snatching the hand that was stroking his hair, he pressed the open palm to his mouth and kissed it. End of chapter 29. All right. So we get Anna's perspective of a scene that has already happened, of her writing to Lydia. What's her name? Yeah, Lydia. Writing to Lydia, asking to see Roysa, and getting first the no response and then the no you can't, and how distraught she is about it. And so she is determined to go and see Roysa. The next day is his birthday. She is going to go there. She makes a plan. She's going to wear a veil. She has a whole backstory ready to go. And she gets there, and somebody that she doesn't know answers the door. And so she pays him off and goes up there, and somebody recognizes her, and instead of ratting her out or anything like that, just bows and directs her. It's "Your Excellency, right this way." And so goes in there. Roysa is just now waking up, he's still yawning, he's half asleep, and she goes in there, and he is just so excited. He's "Oh, I knew that you weren't dead. I knew that you would come to see me because today's my birthday, so of course you came to see me." And she is just "You didn't believe that I was dead?" And he's "No, of course I knew that you were alive." And it is just so nice. So nice. It's a nice moment. We're just going to keep going. We're going to finish today. Well, finish part 5 today. So we're going to keep going. Chapter 30. Meanwhile, Vasily Lukich had not at first understood who this lady was, and had learned from their conversation that it was no other person than the mother who had left her husband, and whom he had not seen as he had entered the house after her departure. He was in doubt to go in or not, or whether to communicate with Alexei Alexandrovich, reflecting finally that his duty was to get Siroiza up at the hour fixed, and that it was therefore not his business to consider who was there, the mother or anyone else, but simply to do his duty. He finished dressing, went to the door, and opened it. But the embraces of the mother and child, the sound of their voices, and what they were saying, made him change his mind. He shook his head, and with a sigh he closed the door. "I'll wait another 10 minutes," he said to himself, clearing his throat and wiping away tears. Among the servants of the household, there was intense excitement all this time. All had heard that their mistress had come, and that Kapnitich had let her in, and that she was even now in the nursery, and that their master always went in person to the nursery at 9 o'clock, and everyone fully comprehended that it was impossible for the husband and the wife to meet, and that they must prevent it. Corny, the valet, was going down to the hall porter's room, asked who had let her in, and how it was he had done so, and ascertaining that Kapnitich had admitted her and shown her up, he gave the old man a talking to. The hall porter was doggedly silent, but when Corny told him he ought to be sent away, Kapnitich darted up to him, and waving his hands in Corny's face began, "Oh yes, to be sure, you'd not have let her in, after 10 years' service, and never a word but of kindness, and there you'd up and say, 'Be off, go along, get away with you.' Oh yes, you're a shrewd one at politics, I dare say. You don't need to be taught how to swindle the master, and to filch fur coats. Soldier," said Corny contemptuously, and he turned to the nurse who was coming in. What do you think, Marya Efimovna?" "He let her in without a word to anyone," Corny said, addressing her. "Alexei Alexandrovich will be down immediately and go into the nursery." A pretty business, said the nurse. "You, Corny Vassilievich, you'd best keep him some way or other, the master, while I'll run and get her away somehow." A pretty business. When the nurse went into the nursery, Siroiza was telling his mother how he and Nadinka had had a fall in sledging downhill and had turned over 3 times. She was listening to the sound of his voice, watching his face and the play of expression on it, touching his hand, but she did not follow what he was saying. She must go. She must leave him. This was the only thing she was thinking and feeling. She heard the steps of Vasily Lukich coming up to the door and coughing. She heard, too, the steps of the nurse as she came near. But she sat like one turned to stone, incapable of beginning to speak or to get up. "Mistress, darling," began the nurse, going up to Anna and kissing her hands and shoulders, "God has brought joy indeed to our boy on his birthday. You aren't changed one bit." "Oh, dear nurse, I didn't know you were in the house," said Anna, rising herself for the minute. "Oh, I'm not living here. I'm living with my daughter. I came for the birthday, Anna Arkadyevna, darling." The nurse suddenly burst into tears and began kissing her hand again. Siroiza, with radiant eyes and smiles, holding his mother by one hand and his nurse by the other, pattered on the rug with his fat little bare feet. The tenderness showed by his beloved nurse to his mother threw him into ecstasy. "Mother, she often comes to see me, and when she comes—" he was beginning, but he stopped, noticing that the nurse was saying something in a whisper to his mother, and that in his mother's face there was a look of dread and something like shame, which was so strangely unbecoming to her. She went up to him, My sweet, she said. She could not say goodbye, but the expression on her face said it, and he understood. Darling, darling to Kutik. She used the name by which she had called him when he was little. You won't forget me. You... But she could not say more. How often afterwards she thought of words she might have said, but now she did not know how to say it, and could say nothing. But Zeroiza knew all she wanted to say to him. He understood that she was unhappy and loved him. He understood even what the nurse had whispered. He had caught the words, always at 9 o'clock. And he knew that this was said of his father, and that his father and mother could not meet. That he understood. But one thing he could not understand, why there should be a look of dread and shame in her face. She was not in fault, but she was afraid of him and ashamed of something. He would have liked to put a question that would have set at rest this doubt, but he did not dare. He saw that she was miserable, and he felt for her. Silently, he pressed close to her and whispered, Don't go yet. He won't come just yet. The mother held him away from her to see what he was thinking, what to say to him, and in his frightened face she read not only that he was speaking of his father, but, as it were, asking her what he ought to think about his father. Zeroiza, my darling, she said, love him. He's better and kinder than I am, and I have done him wrong. When you grow up, you will judge. There's no one better than you, he cried in despair through his tears, and, clutching her by the shoulders, he began squeezing her with all his force to him, his arms trembling with the strain. My sweet, my little one, said Anna, as she cried as weakly and childishly as he. At that moment the door opened. Vasily Lukic came in. At the other door there was the sound of steps, and the nurse, in a scared whisper, said, He's coming, and gave Anna her hat. Zeroiza sank onto the bed and sobbed, hiding his face in his hands. Anna removed his hands, once more kissed his wet face, and with rapid steps went to the door. Alexei Alexandrovich walked in, meeting her. Seeing her, he stopped short and bowed his head. Although he had just said he was better and kinder than she, in the rapid glance she flung at him, taking in his whole figure in all its detail, feelings of repulsion and hatred for him and jealousy over her son took possession of her. With a swift gesture, she put down her veil and quickened her pace, almost ran out of the room. She had not time to undo, and so carried back with her the parcel of toys she had chosen the day before in a toy shop with such love and sorrow. End of chapter 30. Whew. Okay, so Anna goes in there and she's talking, and it's great. And the servants are both excited and both scared. They understand the gravity of this. They know that Anna and Alexei cannot see each other. They know this to be true. And so they're going to go tell Anna to leave, and one of the servants listens and is like, oh, I can't do it, because he hears the conversation between them. He feels the emotion. He knows that this is like a mother and a child who may only see each other in this time and never again. So the servants are trying to protect everybody involved, and so they make up a plan to try and delay Alexei as much as possible, because he goes in to see Zeroiza at exactly 9 o'clock every day. And so they're going to try to delay him, and also the nurse is going to try and get Anna secretly away. And so Anna is unable to say goodbye to Zeroiza. She's just unable to. And she reads in Zeroiza's face, asking how he should feel about his father. And so Anna is like, you need to love him. Like, he is doing the best that he can. He is so kind and so warm and all of these things. And so she gets up. And who does she cross? Alexei and Anna do meet. They don't say anything, but a lot passes between them, and Anna is just so mad at him for keeping her son away from her. But he bows, and then she leaves. And she takes with her the toys that she was going to give her son Siroisa for his birthday that she picked out the day before with so much love and so much care. But she leaves with them. And it's so sad. It's so incredibly sad. All right. Chapter 31. As intensely as Anna had longed to see her son, and long as she had been thinking of it and preparing herself for it, she had not in the least expected that seeing him would affect her so deeply. On getting back to her lonely rooms in the hotel, she could not for a long while understand why she was there. Yes, it's all over, and I am, again, alone, she said to herself, and without taking off her hat, she sat down in a low chair by the hearth, fixing her eyes on a bronze clock. Standing on a table between the windows, she tried to think. The French maid brought from abroad came in to suggest she should dress. She gazed at her, wondering, and said, "Presently." A footman offered her coffee. "Later on," she said. The Italian nurse, after having taken the baby out of her best, came in with her and brought her to Anna. The plump, well-fed little baby, on seeing her mother, as she always did, held out her fat little hands, and with a smile on her toothless mouth, began, like a fish with a float, bobbing her fingers up and down the starched folds of her embroidered skirt, making them rustle. It was impossible not to smile, not to kiss the baby, impossible not to hold out a finger for her to clutch, crowing and prancing all over, impossible not to offer her a lip which she sucked into her little mouth by a way of kiss. And all this Anna did, and took her in her arms and made her dance and kissed her fresh little cheek and bare little elbows. But at the sight of this child, it was plainer than ever to her that the feeling she had for her could not be called love in comparison with what she felt for Siroisa. Everything in this baby was charming, but for some reason all this did not go deep to her heart. On her first child, though the child of an unloved father, had been concentrated all the love that had never found satisfaction. Her baby girl had been born in the most painful circumstances, and had not had 100th part of the care and thought which had been concentrated on her first child. Besides, in the little girl, everything was still in the future, while Siroisa was by now almost a personality, and a personality dearly loved. In him there was a conflict of thought and feeling. He understood her. He loved her. He judged her, she thought, recalling his words and his eyes. And she was forever, not physically only, but spiritually, divided from him. And it was impossible to set this right. She gave the baby back to the nurse, let her go, and opened the locket in which there was Siroisa's portrait, when he was almost of the same age as the girl. She got up and, taking off her hat, took up from the little table an album in which there were photographs of her son at different ages. She wanted to compare them, and began taking them out of the album. She took them all out except one, the latest and best photograph. In it he was in a white smock, sitting astride a chair, with frowning eyes and smiling lips. It was his best, most characteristic expression. With her little supple hands, her white, delicate fingers, that moved with a peculiar intensity today, she pulled at a corner of the photograph, but the photograph had caught somewhere, and she could not get it out. There was no paper knife on the table, and so, pulling out the photograph that was next to her son's, it was a photograph of Vronsky taken at Rome in a round hat with long hair. She used it to push out her son's photograph. "Oh, here he is," she said, glancing at the portrait of Vronsky, and she suddenly recalled that he was the cause of her present misery. She had not once thought of him all the morning, but now, coming all at once upon that manly, noble face, so familiar and so dear to her, she felt a sudden rush of love for him. But where is he? How is it he leaves me alone in my misery? She thought all at once, with a feeling of reproach, forgetting she had herself kept from him everything concerning her son. She sent to ask him to come to her immediately. With a throbbing heart she awaited him, rehearsing to herself the words in which she would tell him all, and the expressions of love with which he would console her. The messenger returned with the answer that he had a visitor with him, but that he would come immediately, and that he asked whether she would let him bring with him Prince Yashvin, who had just arrived in Petersburg. "He's not coming alone, and since dinner yesterday he has not seen me," she thought. "He's not coming so that I could tell him everything, but coming with Yashvin." And all at once, a strange idea came to her. What if he had ceased to love her? And going over the events of the last few days, it seemed to her that she saw in everything a confirmation of this terrible idea. The fact that he had not dined at home yesterday, and the fact that he had insisted on their taking separate sets of rooms in Petersburg, and that even now he was not coming to her alone, as though he were trying to avoid meeting her face to face. "But he ought to tell me so. I must know that it is so. If I knew it, then I know what I should do," she said to herself, utterly unable to picture to herself the position she would be in if she were convinced of his not caring of her. She thought he had ceased to love her. She felt close upon despair, and consequently she felt exceptionally alert. She rang for her maid and went to her dressing room. As she dressed, she took more care over her appearance than she had done all those days, as though he might, if he had grown cold to her, fall in love with her again, because she had dressed and arranged her hair in the way most becoming to her. She heard the bell ring before she was ready. When she went into the drawing room, it was not he, but Yashvin, who met her eyes. Vronsky was looking through the photographs of her son, which she had forgotten on the table, and he made no haste to look round at her. "We have met already," she said, putting her little hand into the huge hand of Yashvin, whose bashfulness was so oddly out of keeping with his immense frame and coarse face. "We met last year at the races. Give them to me," she said with a rapid movement, snatching from Vronsky the photographs of her son, and glancing significantly at him with flashing eyes. "Were the races good this year? Instead of them, I saw the races in the Corso in Rome. But you don't care for life abroad," she said with a cordial smile. "I know you and all your tastes, though I have seen so little of you." "Well, I'm awfully sorry for that, for my tastes are mostly bad," said Yashvin, gnawing at his left mustache. Having talked a little while, and noticing that Vronsky glanced at the clock, Yashvin asked her whether she would be staying much longer in Petersburg, and unbending his huge figure, reached after his cap. "Not long, I think," she said hesitatingly, glancing at Vronsky. "So then we shan't meet again." "Come and dine with me," said Anna resolutely, angry, it seemed, with herself for her embarrassment, but flushing, as she always did when she defined her position before a fresh person. "The dinner here is not good, but at least you will see him. There is no one of his old friends in the regiment Alexei cares for as he does for you." "Delighted," said Yashvin with a smile, from which Vronsky could see that he liked Anna very much. Yashvin said goodbye and went away. Vronsky stayed behind. "Are you going too?" she said to him. "I'm late already," he answered. "Run along, I'll catch you up in a moment," he called to Yashvin. She took him by the hand and, without taking her eyes off him, gazed at him while she ransacked her mind for the words to say that would keep him. "Wait a minute. There's something I want to say to you." And taking his broad hand, she pressed it to her neck. "Oh, was it right my asking him to dinner?" "You did quite right," he said with a serene smile that showed his even teeth, and he kissed her hand. "Alexei, you have not changed to me?" she said, pressing his hand to both of hers. "Alexei, I am miserable here. When are we going away?" "Soon. Soon. You wouldn't believe how disagreeable our way of living here is to me, too," he said, and he drew away his hand. "Well, go," she said in a tone of offense, and she walked quickly away from him. End of chapter 31. Okay, chapter 31. Anna is distraught. Anna is so distraught, and she gets back to her hotel room, and her baby is there, and she realizes, how can she love this baby when she loves Siroiza so much? How? Which is the exact opposite of what Anna was feeling when she was abroad. She was so consumed by her current baby child that she was like, I rarely even think of Siroiza. But now that she's back here, back with all of the, like, real life of not traveling around, here we are. And so Anna is just only thinking of Siroiza. And then she has this moment of, wait a minute. Does Vronsky no longer love me? And so she's replaying the past couple days and seeing the instances that the decisions that he's made. They haven't had dinner together. They have separate rooms, like all of these other things, when in reality, Vronsky is doing these things, maybe a little bit because Anna has lost the luster that he has seen, but also to help protect her from the rumor mill and from everything in the society that they're currently in. It's almost like they should be talking to each other. Almost. Maybe. I don't know. What do I know? I know nothing. There are points when you just want to beg Tolstoy, please, my heart, sir. Communication? No. It's impossible. Judging from this, you would think it would be, or that it is. All right. Chapter 32. When Vronsky returned home, Anna was not yet home. Soon after he had left, some lady, so they told him, had come to see her, and she had gone out with her. That she had gone out without leaving word where she was going, that she had not yet come back, and that all the morning she had been going about somewhere without a word to him. All this, together with the strange look of excitement in her face in the morning, and the recollection of the hostile tone with which she had before Yashvin almost snatched her son's photographs out of his hands, made him serious. He decided he absolutely must speak openly with her, and he waited for her in her drawing room. But Anna did not return alone, but brought with her her old unmarried aunt, Princess Oblonskaya. This was the lady who had come in the morning, and with whom Anna had gone out shopping. Anna appeared not to notice Vronsky's worried and inquiring expression, and began a lively account of her morning's shopping. He saw that there was something working within her. In her flashing eyes, when they rested for a moment on him, there was an intense concentration, and her words and movements, there was that nervous rapidity and grace which, during the early period of their intimacy, had so fascinated him, but which now so disturbed and alarmed him. The dinner was laid for 4. All were gathered together and about to go into the little dining room when Tushkevich made his appearance with a message from Princess Betsy. Princess Betsy begged her to excuse her not having come to say goodbye. She had been indisposed. but begged Anna to come to her between 6:30 and 9 o'clock. Vronsky glanced at Anna at the precise limit of time, so suggestive of steps having been taken that she should meet no one. But Anna appeared not to notice it. "Very sorry that I can't come just between 6:30 and 9, she said with a faint smile. "The princess will be very sorry, and so am I." "You're going, no doubt, to hear Patty?" said Tushkevich. "Patty? You suggest the idea to me. I would go if it were possible to get a box." "I can get one." Tushkevich offered his services. "I should be very, very grateful to you," said Anna. "But won't you dine with us?" Vronsky gave a hardly perceptible shrug. He was at a complete loss to understand what Anna was about. What had she brought the old Princess Oblinskaya home for? What had she made Tushkevich stay to dinner for? And, most amazing of all, why was she sending him for a box? Could she possibly think in her position of going to Patty's benefit, where all the circle of her acquaintances would be? He looked at her with serious eyes, but she responded with that defiant, half-mirthful, half-desperate look, the meaning of which he could not comprehend. At dinner, Anna was in aggressively high spirits. She almost flirted both with Tushkevich and with Yashvin. When they got up from dinner, and Tushkevich had gone to get a box at the opera, Yashvin went to smoke, and Vronsky went down with him to his own rooms. After sitting there for some time, he ran upstairs. Anna was already dressed in a low-necked gown of light silk and velvet that she had had made in Paris, and with costly white lace on her head, framing her face, and particularly becoming, showing up her dazzling beauty. "Are you really going to the theater?" he asked, trying not to look at her. "Why do you ask with such alarm?" she said, wounded again at his not looking at her. "Why shouldn't I go?" She appeared not to understand the motive of his words. "Oh, of course. There's no reason whatever," he said, frowning. "That's just what I say," she said, willfully refusing to see the irony of his tone, and quietly turning back her long, perfumed glove. "Anna, for God's sake, what is the matter with you?" he said, appealing to her exactly as once her husband had done. "I don't understand what you are asking. You know that it's out of the question to go." "Why so? I'm not going alone. Princess Varvara has gone to dress. She is going with me." He shrugged his shoulders with an air of perplexity and despair. But do you mean to say you don't know?" he began. "But I don't care to know," she almost shrieked. "I don't care to. Do I regret what I have done? No. No, no. If it were all to do again, from the beginning, it would be the same. For us, for you, and for me. There is only one thing that matters, whether we love each other. Other people we need not consider. Why are we living here apart and not seeing each other? Why can't I go? I love you, and I don't care for anything," she said in Russian, glancing at him with a peculiar gleam in her eyes that he could not understand. "If you have not changed to me, why don't you look at me?" He looked at her. He saw all the beauty of her face and full dress, always so becoming to her. But now her beauty and elegance were just what irritated him. "My feeling cannot change, you know. But I beg you, I entreat you," he said again in French, with a note of tender supplication in his voice, but with coldness in his eyes. She did not hear his words, but she saw the coldness of his eyes, and answered with irritation, "And I beg you to explain why I should not go." "Because it might cause you..." He hesitated. "I don't understand. Yashvin n'est pas promenade, and Princess Varvara is no worse than others. Oh, here she is." End of chapter 32. Okay, chapter 32, Anna. Okay, Anna, once again, Anna and Vronsky are having troubles communicating. Anna just does not understand, and she is convinced that Vronsky no longer loves her like he did before. And Vronsky just does not understand why Anna is going out, why she is in society, why she is going shopping, why she wants to go to the ballet, why she wants to have people over for dinner, because he is trying to protect her so much from all of the horribleness that can happen for her position. And so they're not really communicating to each other. And so they're just having this back and forward, and Vronsky doesn't understand why Anna doesn't understand, and Anna doesn't understand why Vronsky doesn't understand. And so they're going back and forth, and Anna's like, I don't understand. I'm leaving, okay? I'm leaving. I'm not going by myself. I'm going to be with, what's-her-face, Princess Varvara, and everything will be fine. And so she is like dressing up really, really nice, and Vronsky won't even look at her. And she's like, why won't you look at me? Why? And so he looks at her and he's like, of course my feelings for you haven't changed. And he sees how beautiful she is and how flawless she is, and that just irritates him. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's kind of like 500 Days of Summer, where like she's doing the same things, and he loved so much the little things that he did, the little quirks that, you know, she's doing, and now it's changed. So now the things that she's doing are just so annoying and irritating, and it's just beautiful. I don't understand it. Okay, last chapter of the part. We're just doing it. We're doing it. Here we go. Chapter 33. Vronsky, for the first time, experienced a feeling of anger against Anna, almost a hatred for her willfully refusing to understand her own position. This feeling was aggravated by his being unable to tell her plainly the cause of his anger. If he had told her directly what he was thinking, he would have said, in that dress, with a princess only too well known to everyone, to show yourself at the theater is equivalent not merely to acknowledging your position as a fallen woman, but is flinging down a challenge to society. That is to say, cutting yourself off from it forever. He could not say that to her. But how can she fail to see it? And what is going on in her? He said to himself. He felt at the same time that his respect for her was diminished, while his sense of her beauty was intensified. He went back scowling to his rooms, and sitting down beside Yashvin, who, with his long legs stretched out on a chair, was drinking brandy and seltzer water, he ordered a glass of the same for himself. You were talking of Lankovich powerful. That's a fine horse, and I would advise you to buy him, said Yashvin, glancing at his comrade's gloomy face. His hindquarters aren't quite first-rate, but the legs and head, one couldn't wish for anything better. I think I will take him, answered Vronsky. Their conversation about horses interested him, but he did not for an instant forget Anna, and could not help listening to the sound of steps in the corridor and looking at the clock on the chimney-piece. Anna Arkadyevna gave orders to announce that she has gone to the theater. Yashvin, tipping another glass of brandy into the bubbling water, drank it and got up, buttoning his coat. Well, let's go, he said, faintly smiling under his mustache, and showing by this smile that he knew the cause of Vronsky's gloominess, and did not attach any significance to it. I'm not going, Vronsky answered gloomily. Well, I must. I promised to. Goodbye, then. If you do come to the stalls, you can take Kruzen's stall, added Yashvin as he went out. No, I'm busy. A wife is a care, but it's worse when she's not a wife, thought Yashvin, as he walked out of the hotel. Vronsky, left alone, got up from his chair and began pacing up and down the room. And what's today? The fourth night. Yegor and his wife are there, and my mother, most likely. Of course, all Petersburg there. Now she's gone in, taken off her cloak, and come into the light. Tushkevich, Yashvin, Princess Varvara. He pictured them to himself. What about me? Either that I'm frightened or have given up to Tushkevich the right to protect her. From every point of view. Stupid. Stupid. And why is she putting me in such a position? He said with a gesture of despair. With that gesture, he knocked against the table on which there was standing the seltzer water and the decanter of brandy, and almost upset it. He tried to catch it, let it slip, and angrily kicked the table over and rang. If you care to be in my service, he said to the valet who came in, you had better remember your duties. This shouldn't be here. You ought to have cleared away. The valet, conscious of his own innocence, would have defended himself, but glancing at his master, he saw from his face that the only thing to do was to be silent, and hurriedly threading his way in and out, dropped down on the carpet and began gathering up the whole and broken glasses and bottles. That's not your duty. Send the waiter to clear away, and get my dress coat out. Vronsky went into the theater at 8:30. The performance was in full swing. The little old boxkeeper, recognizing Vronsky as he helped him off with his fur coat, called him Your Excellency, and suggested he should not take a number, but should simply call Fyodor. In the brightly lighted corridor there was no one but the box opener and two attendants with fur cloaks on their arms, listening at the doors. Through the closed doors came the sounds of the discreet staccato accompaniment of the orchestra and a single female voice rendering distinctly a musical phrase. The door opened to let the box opener slip through, and the phrase drawing to the end reached Vronsky's hearing clearly. But the doors were closed again at once, and Vronsky did not hear the end of the phrase and the cadence of the accompaniment, though he knew from the thunder of applause that it was over. When he entered the hall, brilliantly lighted with chandeliers and gas jets, the noise was still going on. On the stage, the singer, bowing and smiling, with bare shoulders flashing with diamonds, was, with the help of the tenor who had given her his arm, gathering up the bouquets that were flying awkwardly over the footlights. Then she went up to a gentleman with glossy, pomaded hair parted down the center, who was stretching across the footlights, holding out something to her. And all the public in the stalls, as well as in the boxes, was in excitement, craning forward, shouting, clapping. The conductor, in his high chair, assisted in passing the offering, and straightened his white tie. Vronsky walked into the middle of the stalls and, standing still, began looking about him. That day, less than ever, was his attention turned upon the familiar, habitual surroundings, the stage, the noise, all familiar, uninteresting, party-colored herd of spectators in the packed theater. There was, as always, the same ladies of some sort with officers of some sort in the back of the boxes, and same gaily dressed women, God knows who, and uniforms and black coats, the same dirty crowd in the upper gallery, and among the crowd, in the boxes and in the front rows, were some 40 of the real people. And to those oases, Vronsky at once directed his attention, and with them he entered at once into relation. The act was over when he came in, and so he did not go straight to his brother's box, but going up to the first row of stalls, stopped at the footlights with Serpuhovskoy, who, standing with one knee raised and his heel in the footlights, caught sight of him in the distance and beckoned to him, smiling. Vronsky had not yet seen Anna. He purposely avoided looking in her direction, but he knew by the direction of people's eyes where she was. He looked round discreetly, but he was not seeking her. Expecting the worst, his eyes sought for Alexei Alexandrovich. To his relief, Alexei Alexandrovich was not in the theater that evening. "How little of the military man there is left in you," Subhovskoy was saying to him. "A diplomat, an artist, something of that sort, one would say." "Yeah, it was like going back home when I put on a black coat," answered Vronsky, smiling and slowly taking out his opera glass. "Well, I'll own I envy you there. When I come back from abroad and put on this," he touches his epaulets, "I regret my freedom." Subhovskoy had long given up all hope of Vronsky's career, but he liked him as before and was now particularly cordial to him. "What a pity you were not in time for the first act." Vronsky, listening with one ear, moved his opera glass from the stalls and scanned the boxes. Near a lady in a turban and a bald old man who seemed to wave angrily in the moving opera glass, Vronsky suddenly caught sight of Anna's head, proud, strikingly beautiful, and smiling in the frame of lace. She was in the 5th box, 20 paces from him. She was sitting in front and, slightly turning, was saying something to Yashvin. The setting of her head on her handsome, broad shoulders, and the restrained excitement and brilliance of her eyes and her whole face reminded him of her just as he had seen her at the ball in Moscow. But he felt utterly different towards her beauty now. In his feeling for her now there was no element of mystery, and so her beauty, though it attracted him even more intensely than before, gave him now a sense of injury. She was not looking in his direction, but Vronsky felt that she had seen him already. When Vronsky turned the opera glass again in that direction, he noticed that Princess Varvara was particularly red and kept laughing unnaturally and looking round at the next box. Anna, folding her fan and tapping it on the red velvet, was gazing away and did not see, and obviously did not wish to see, what was taking place in the next box. Yashvin's face wore the expression which was common when he was losing at cards. Scowling, he sucked the left end of his mustache further and further into his mouth, and cast sidelong glances at the next box. In that box, on the left, were the Kartasovs. Vronsky knew them, and knew that Anna was acquainted with them. Madame Kartasova, a thin little woman, was standing up in her box, and, her back turned upon Anna, she was putting on a mantle that her husband was holding for her. Her face was pale and angry, and she was talking excitedly. Kartasov, a fat, bald man, was continually looking round at Anna while he attempted to soothe his wife. When the wife had gone out, the husband lingered a long while and tried to catch Anna's eye, obviously anxious to bow to her. But Anna, with unmistakable intention, avoided noticing him, and talked to Yashvin, whose cropped head was bent down to her. Kartasov went out without making his salutation, and the box was left empty. Vronsky could not understand exactly what had passed between the Kartasovs and Anna, but he saw that something humiliating for Anna had happened. He knew this both from what he had seen, and most of all, from the face of Anna, who, he could see, was taxing every nerve to carry through the part she had taken up. And in maintaining this attitude of external composure, she was completely successful. Anyone who did not know her and her circle, who had not heard of the utterances of the woman expressive of commiseration, indignation, and amazement, that she should show herself in society and show herself so conspicuously with her lace and her beauty, would have admired the serenity and loveliness of this woman without a suspicion that she was undergoing the sensations of a man in the stocks. Knowing that something had happened, but not knowing precisely what, Vronsky felt a thrill of agonizing anxiety, and hoping to find out something, he went towards his brother's box. Purposely choosing the way round furthest from Anna's box, he jostled as he came out against the colonel of his old regiment, talking to two acquaintances. Vronsky heard the name of Madame Karenina, and noticed how the colonel hastened to address Vronsky loudly by name, with a meaning glance at his companions. "Ah, Vronsky, when are you coming to the regiment? We can't let you off without a supper. You're one of the old set," said the colonel of his regiment. "I can't stop. Awfully sorry. Another time," said Vronsky, and he ran upstairs towards his brother's box. The old countess, Vronsky's mother, with her steel-gray curls, was in his brother's box. Varya, with the young Princess Sorokina, met him in the corridor. Leaving the Princess Sorokina with her mother, Varya held out her hand to her brother-in-law and began immediately to speak of what interested him. She was more excited than he had ever seen her. "I think it's mean and hateful, and Madame Kardasova had no right to do it. Madame Karenina," she began. "But what is it? I don't know." "What? You've not heard? You know I should be the last person to hear of it. There isn't a more spiteful creature than that Madame Kardasova." "But what did she do?" "My husband told me. She has insulted Madame Karenina. Her husband began talking to her across the box, and Madame Kardasova made a scene. She said something aloud. She says something insulting, and went away." "Count, your maman is asking for you," said the young Princess Sorokina, peeping out of the door of the box. "I've been expecting you all the while," said his mother, smiling sarcastically. "You were nowhere to be seen." Her son saw that she could not suppress a smile of delight. "Good evening, maman. I have come to you," he said coldly. "Why aren't you going to faire la cour à Madame Karenina?" she went on, when Princess Sorokina had moved away. "Maman, I have asked you not to say anything to me of that," he answered, scowling. "I only saying what everyone's saying." Vronsky made no reply, and saying a few words to Princess Sorokina, he went away. At the door he met his brother. "Ah, Alexei," said his brother. "How disgusting. Idiot of a woman. Nothing else. I wanted to go straight to her. Let's go together." Vronsky did not hear him. With rapid steps he went downstairs. He felt that he must do something, but he did not know what. Anger with her for having put herself and him in such a false position, together with pity for her suffering, filled his heart. He went down and made straight for Anna's box. At her box stood Stremov, talking to her. "There are no more tenors." Vronsky bowed to her and stopped to greet Stremov. "Oh, you came in late, I think, and missed the best song," Anna said to Vronsky, glancing ironically, he thought, at him. "I am a poor judge of music," he said, looking sternly at her. "Like Prince Yashvin," she said, smiling, "who considers that Patty sings too loud." "Thank you," she said, her little hand in its long glove taking the playbill Vronsky picked up, and suddenly at that instant her lovely face quivered. She got up and went into the interior of the box. Noticing in the next act that her box was empty, Vronsky, rousing indignant hushes in the silent audience, went out in the middle of a solo and drove home. Anna was already at home. When Vronsky went up to her, she was in the same dress as she had worn at the theater. She was sitting in the first armchair against the wall, looking straight before her. She looked at him and at once resumed her former position. "Anna," he said, you are to blame for everything," she cried, with tears of despair and hatred in her voice, getting up. "I begged, I implored you not to go. I knew it would be unpleasant. Unpleasant, she cried. Hideous. As long as I live, I shall never forget it. She said it was a disgrace to sit beside me." "A silly woman's chatter," he said. "But why risk it? Why provoke? I hate your calm. You ought not to have brought me to this. If you had loved me, Anna, how does the question of my love come in? Oh, if you loved me as I love, if you were tortured as I am," she said, looking at him with an expression of terror. He was sorry for her, and angry, notwithstanding. He assured her of his love because he saw that this was the only means of soothing her. And he did not reproach her in words, but in his heart he reproached her. And the asseverations of his love, which seemed to him so vulgar that he was ashamed to utter them, she drank in eagerly and gradually became calmer. The next day, completely reconciled, they left for the country. End of part 5. End of chapter 33. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy. Okay, so Anna gets all dolled up and she goes out to the theater. Even though Vronsky tried to protect her, tried to say, don't go because people will talk either to her or about her and spread rumors, and it's not going to be a great scene. It's not, Anna. It's not. But Anna is just convinced that Vronsky doesn't love her, and that's why he has been like this, and doesn't see that part, doesn't see or is just willfully ignoring the part of society. And so she goes out there, and Vronsky is like, oh, this woman, why? And so he's hanging out with Yashvin. Yashvin's like, all right, I'm going to go. And Vronsky's like, yeah, I'm not. And Yashvin's like, all right, well, if you change your mind, come find me. And so Vronsky, of course, goes. And of course, there's drama. We see it from afar, from Anna's, box and the box next to her. And we are also looking for Alexei Alexandrovich, and we don't see him. Thankfully, he has not decided to come to the theater that night. And so we go over there, and Anna just kind of gives us the cold shoulder, and we find out from our sister-in-law that there was a scene, that somebody called out Anna for being there. And for, how dare she be there for how she's acted? How dare she be there for blah, blah, blah. And so Vronsky goes over there to Anna. Anna leaves. Vronsky's sitting in the box and realizes that he's alone. And so he goes home. Anna is already home. And Anna is just furious, has been fuming, and is just like yelling, like, why don't you love me? Why? And Vronsky's like, I told you not to go there. I knew this was happening, and you didn't answer me. You didn't listen to me. And Anna's like, how could you not love me? And she is just getting all riled up. And Vronsky knows that the only way to calm her down is to just say that he loves her, is to just keep repeating it and soothing her, even though he doesn't love her. And he has this realization. He's had little twinges of it before, but now it's just like, good heavens, I don't love this woman anymore. But I have to keep saying this so that she will calm down. And so she does calm down. And the very next day, they leave for the country. When they were in the country before, things were better for both of them. We did it. We finished the chapter. We finished the part. Amazing. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been fun. We got some fun tattoos today. So cute. Little ghosty. Little pile of books. Love to see it. Thank you. As always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you. And I 1000% appreciate your support. If I don't see you next time, I hope to see you very soon. Bye.